From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin tonight with a story that's going to be regarded as good news by people of all ages in America, from the corporate boardroom to the school lunchroom. The world's largest tuna canning company, StarKist, has said today it will no longer buy tuna caught in the kind of fishing nets which also trap and kill dolphins. It is another sign that environmental forces in America are having an effect on big business. We have two reports. First on the tuna. Here's ABC's Jean Meserve.
Today's announcement is intended to protect the dolphins who swim with yellowfin tuna in the eastern Pacific. 100,000 dolphins are trapped and killed every year in fishermen's nets.
Today we announced that StarKist will not purchase any tuna caught in association with dolphin. StarKist will sell only dolphin-free tuna.
Chicken of the Sea made a similar announcement today. Bumblebee is expected to follow suit.
What they have done today is set an example to the world to say that tuna that is caught at the expense of dolphins is unacceptable.
Environmental protesters had been joined by consumers, restaurants, and even some school districts who had boycotted tuna. Now, tuna may cost an additional 2 cents or more per can. American fishermen had already reduced the number of dolphins they kill by modifying their nets and avoiding areas where the tuna swim with dolphins. And there is a government inspector on every boat. But the fishermen say the insistence on absolutely dolphin-free tuna will put them out of business.
What they're doing, they're going to force all these boats out of here to countries that don't have any laws and any rules, so there'll be more boats for them to kill more porpoise.
Foreign fishing fleets are now believed responsible for 80% of dolphin deaths. They don't sell much of their catch in the U.S. and aren't subject to American regulation. So the dolphin is still very much at risk. Jean Meserve, ABC News, Washington.
This announcement by the tuna packers today is the latest example of what might be called the greening of the American economy. Many companies are waking up to the fact that what is good for the environment can also be good for business. Here's ABC's Bob Jamieson.
Last year's Alaska oil spill was a turning point for American corporations. Nobody wants to be Exxon. These images of oil-soaked otters were followed by a consumer survey that showed 77% of Americans would look at a company's environmental record before buying its product. And some American corporations are getting the message. Conoco this week broke with the rest of the oil industry and ordered double-hulled tankers, less likely to leak than the single-hulled kind involved in the Alaska spill. Shell has announced the biggest attempt yet to sell a newly formulated clean gasoline in the nation's dirtiest cities. DuPont has decided to end production of the coolants used in refrigerators, the chemical blamed for destroying the ozone layer. McDonald's has launched an ambitious recycling program for its plastic and paper waste. And Monsanto Chemical was recently honored by the National Wildlife Federation.
We feel very strongly about the public's interest in the subject, our own interest, and we want to be part of the solution. We want to be part of the cleanup.
As fast as they announce something green, companies are on television or in the newspapers selling it as environmentally friendly. Sometimes they sell it too fast. Mobil was forced to remove environmental claims from its hefty trash bags. And green has gone to Wall Street. Stockbrokers are pushing mutual funds made up of companies with strong environmental records. Over the last year, investors have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into these funds.
We think the future is very bright for companies that are in the environmental services area and companies that provide clean alternatives to current products that are not good for the environment.
Really, what they're saying is this is a hot thing. We know people will buy it, and we're going to exploit it.
Some environmental activists think that corporations, like the financial community, are jumping on the environmental bandwagon before it runs them over.
You're either for the environment or you're not. And a lot of these corporations are not for the environment. They're just trying to look that way.
To avoid more environmental disasters, activists have formulated the Valdez Principles. They want companies to pledge that they'll sell only safe products, clean up their messes, and put environmentalists on their boards. Attempts to have the Valdez Principles adopted at 20 annual stockholders meetings this year are opposed by most of the corporations, including Exxon. Bob Jamieson, ABC News, New York.
One other note about fishing. If you like raw clams or oysters, you will not like this. The government today warned that you had better start cooking shellfish before eating it. A government report out today finds a 58% increase in hepatitis A over the past 6 years. One way you can get hepatitis A is by eating raw shellfish. The report also calls for restaurant workers to wear gloves. Reports today on the president's health and his financial well-being. The president went for a routine physical, which showed nothing more than early signs of glaucoma in his left eye, which can be treated with eye drops. And the White House released the presidential tax return today. The Bushes had more, or income of more than $450,000 last year from salary and a blind trust. They gave nearly $38,000 to charity. They paid $101,000 in federal income tax. In a moment, the other news. Is Iraq really trying to build the world's largest gun? And later in the broadcast, what has gone wrong in Margaret Thatcher's Britain? And what the supermarket of the future is going to look like.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Enterprise Rent-A-Car.
There are rent-a-car companies better known than Enterprise, but none that know their customers better.
For the windshield wipers.
Call us. We'll come pick you up.
All right, we'll be there in 15 minutes.
Drop the car off, we'll drop you home. Because at Enterprise, we don't just care about the distance our cars go.
May I help you? Thank you.
But the distance our people go. Enterprise Rent-A-Car. We go the extra distance.
Years ago when I was a waiter, I had awful backaches. My doctor recommended the pain reliever and prescription Motrin. Today, he recommends Motrin IB for pain.
Motrin IB. No prescription needed.
Now it's my place, and my splitting headaches. And Motrin IB has the strength I need.
One Motrin IB is as effective as 2 regular-strength Tylenol.
My headaches just stop, and it's much gentler on my stomach than aspirin.
Motrin IB, doctor-recommended pain relief.
Overseas today, what the British describe as another attempt by Iraq to obtain a weapon capable of mass destruction. British customs officials have seized 8 crates of giant pipes headed for Iraq. They claim the pipes could be used to form the barrel of the world's largest gun. The Iraqis say the British have confiscated nothing but equipment purchased for use in a chemical plant. Here's ABC's Charles Glass.
One of the British government's military experts today inspected the steel pipes ordered by Iraq. He concluded the tubes can be assembled into one of the world's largest cannons.
And he was satisfied that these were the parts of a barrel which could be used to fire projectiles.
Customs agents in northeast England seized the shipment yesterday from a cargo ship bound for Iraq. Both Iraq's ambassador to Britain and the British steelworks that manufactured the tubes insist they were designed for an Iraqi petrochemical plant.
What we made were a series of tubes. And, I mean, they're not like any sort of a gun. We do make gun barrels. And, in fact, they're immediately recognizable.
Customs officers say the pipes can be assembled into an artillery piece with a barrel 130 feet long. Arms experts disagree, but many believe a weapon that size could fire artillery shells more than 300 miles, easily hitting any of Iraq's enemies, including Israel. They could carry warheads with conventional, chemical, or even nuclear weapons. The shells would have to be at least 39 inches in diameter, more than twice the size of those fired at Lebanon in 1983 from the famous 15-inch guns of the U.S. battleship New Jersey.
Whether or not the steel pipes turn out definitely to be a giant cannon, the U.S. and Europe can claim few victories in preventing embargoed weapons from reaching the Middle East. One customs source complained that with all the military technology making its way to Iraq, they were lucky to catch even 1%. Charles Glass, ABC News, London.
President Hussein said today that Iraq has nothing to hide about its military. During a meeting with a delegation of U.S. senators, Hussein said he would dismantle his arsenal of chemical weapons if Israel, Iran, and other countries in the Middle East scrapped what he called their weapons of mass destruction. Elsewhere in the Middle East today, the Israelis used tear gas to break up a demonstration by Palestinian Christians, including Greek Orthodox priests in Jerusalem. It all began when a few hundred Jews decided they would move into the Christian quarter of the old city. Here's ABC's Dean Reynolds.
There was a lot of yelling outside this address in Jerusalem's Christian quarter today because some Jews had settled in. The Greek Orthodox Church owns the building, but didn't know it had been sublet to 200 Jews who want to redeem the mostly Arab enclave for the Jewish people.
Only by living and by actually being inside these territories, inside these places, can we claim and say this land is ours.
But that claim was disputed today by a priest who tore the Star of David off the facade and ignited a clash with police. The Greek Orthodox bishop was slightly injured, and a number of Christian tourists got an unwelcome taste of tear gas. Inside the bishop's residence nearby, the protesters were joined by Palestinian nationalists. Down the street, Jerusalem Mayor Teddy Kollek said the Jewish settlers were to blame.
I am personally all against it. I think it's a stupidity on part of the Jews who go there.
But the Palestinians were not impressed, leaving Kollek to watch what he'd come to prevent. Palestinians inside the bishop's residence threw rocks and bottles down on the police. The officers then laid siege to the building, entered it, and broke up the protest. Late tonight, a Jerusalem court said the settlers would have to move out. But the episode made Easter week in the Holy City memorable for all the wrong reasons. Dean Reynolds, ABC News, Jerusalem.
In our next segment, the Japanese economy, sorting out victory from defeat.
I was driving my LeBaron convertible, and I looked down to turn off the air conditioning. When I looked up, there was a car stopped in front of me. The next thing I knew, it was just crashed. It was awful.
I don't want to think of how it might have turned out without the airbag. I never want to own another car that doesn't have an airbag. You can see what it's worth. Kim was living proof.
As a parent, I know exactly how John feels. That's one of the reasons we put an airbag in every car we build in the U.S. Too bad nobody else does.
This plant didn't have to die. Just a few cents worth of Miracid could have saved it. When azaleas and other evergreens turn sickly yellow, they need more than just fertilizer. They need Miracid. You see, ordinary fertilizers just feed, but Miracid feeds, ironizes, acidifies, helps restore vigor and beauty. And with Miracid in your Miracle-Gro feeder, you can keep azalea and other evergreens beautiful year-round. It's so easy. Just drop in and spray on. So fast, you'll treat all your plants in minutes.
Atta girl, Fergie and her prince blessed with a precious new princess. Wait till you see Eugenie in the exclusive portrait only in this week's People, taken by the proud papa himself. This week, bringing home baby. People, that's what we're all about.
When constipation strikes, you feel bloated, twisted. You just can't go on. You want fast medicine. X-Lax, to put you back on top of the world. Fast. X-Lax, the right medicine.
The Census Bureau says that the 1990 census is running slow and late and will cost more. Only about 57% of the forms have been returned. The Bureau had expected 70%, and it could cost millions of dollars to hire more interviewers to reach the people who have not mailed back their forms. 1 week after reaching a new trade agreement with Japan, President Bush had glowing words today for the negotiators who worked out the deal. The president said he cannot remember any one-month period in relations with Japan that had gone so well. Last week, the Japanese Prime Minister Toshiki Kaifu warned that the trade agreement would impose hardship on Japan. We asked our Tokyo Bureau Chief Bill Redeker to check it out. Once again, the Japanese have turned adversity into advantage.
Since the beginning of this year, Japanese stocks have lost more than 25% of their value. The Japanese yen has fallen 10% against the U.S. dollar. Interest rates here have gone up, and Japanese trade negotiators have appeared to cave in to recent American demands.
If all of this sounds like Japan's economy has hit the skids and America's huge trade deficit could soon be erased, think again.
In 1990, Japan's growth rate is expected to again surpass that of the United States. In 1990, Japanese business will continue to boom, despite lower stock earnings and trade concessions meant to appease protectionist-minded American congressmen.
If Congress accepts this as the final outcome of years of trade discussions with Japan, they should put a new sign over the Capitol that says, "Patsies are us."
Japan has an uncanny knack of changing, of transforming impositions on it into advantages for itself.
For example, the weaker yen won't hurt exports. It should make Japanese products less expensive. A weaker yen also will make it tougher for U.S. companies to crack Japan's markets because American goods will be more expensive here. Case in point, gardening tools from California. Because it now takes more yen to import them, merchants here either had to raise prices or reduce their inventory. In competitive Japan, the decision was easy: cut the orders. But Japan's biggest concession came when it agreed to make fundamental changes in its distribution system, opening its closed retail market. Thousands of mom-and-pop stores have blocked American discount chains from opening here. Now that will change, another agreement that should ultimately benefit Japan.
By forcing the Japanese to strengthen what is now a weakness for Japan, its distribution system, that the whole economy becomes more efficient and therefore more competitive.
So last week's American victory is no defeat for Japan. There is no crisis of confidence here.
It will be better for the Japanese economy from the point of view of efficiency. So I am thankful, I'm grateful for the suggestions raised by your negotiators.
Bill Redeker, ABC News, Tokyo.
Just before we leave the subject of comparisons between the U.S. and Japan, a study by the University of Michigan finds American men and women spend more than 20 hours a week at leisure activities. The Japanese, 10 to 13 hours a week. On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained about 22 points and the trading was slow. The market is closed tomorrow, Good Friday, so the gain for the week so far, 34.5 points. The city of Cincinnati is finding that censorship can be costly. This week, the local prosecutor charged the Contemporary Art Center there with obscenity for displaying photographs by the late Robert Mapplethorpe. Now, the College Art Association says it will not hold its 1995 conference there, and the Ceramic Arts Council, which has just ended its national conference in Cincinnati, says it will never go back. We'll be back in just a moment.
Mr. Green has a mower he purchased brand new. Oh, the wonderful things he thought it would do. But it sputtered, it coughed, it gave quite a wheeze. And mowing the yard was not such a breeze. And so when the time came to buy something new, Mr. Green bought a snapper, and so should you. For your yard and your garden, these snappers, you see, take mowing and grooming more seriously. And now when he mows, Mr. Green is seen with something we'd call a serious machine.
When choosing a new car, don't compromise. Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme SL is longer and wider, yet accelerates faster than Ford Taurus. It's more powerful, yet gets better highway gas mileage than Honda Accord. And it has a better owner satisfaction plan than both, which obviously makes Cutlass Supreme the smarter choice, all the way around.
This is the new generation of Olds.
Now get up to $2,600 cash back on a 1990 Cutlass Supreme. See your Olds dealer today.
My husband, Elliot, he's an inventor. He's made a very good life for both of us. Last year, this big company paid a lot of money for one of his ideas. Elliot even thought about opening his own company, but in the end, we decided to invest the money. Besides, I'm not sure Elliot's cut out to work in an office anyway.
To invest tax-free with John Newbean and Company, call your financial advisor or this number.
Switch to oat bran? No way. Post Bran Flakes gives me 2/3 more fiber than the leading oat bran flake, and that keeps the brass in this horn.
Post Natural Bran Flakes, keeping you at your best.
2/3 more fiber.
If you took Benadryl for your allergy this morning, there's something you should know. Contact maximum strength caplets work twice as long.
Gesundheit!
Until there's a cure, there's contact.
The British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher has arrived in Bermuda. President Bush arrives there tomorrow morning. They will spend the day talking about the political changes in Europe. Mrs. Thatcher is one of the longest-serving elected heads of government anywhere, and in the most serious political trouble of her career. In the opinion poll, she gets only a 24% approval rating, which is lower than Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain got when he was accused of giving in to Adolf Hitler on the eve of World War II. On Mrs. Thatcher's Britain, ABC's Barry Dunsmore.
The worst riots seen in central London in this century, sparked by a new tax here called the poll tax. Because rich and poor will pay the same in each municipality, the tax is seen, even by many of the well-off, as intrinsically unfair. But many in Britain believe the riots were also an expression of anger about a decade of Margaret Thatcher's policies. The division between haves and have-nots has widened.
You've had a far greater disparity between the banker and the stockbroker, whose salaries have enormously increased, and the ordinary manual worker, who in some cases has gone down in real terms.
Since World War II, the government here has promised the people of Britain that it would provide the minimum requirements in shelter, education, and health care. Mrs. Thatcher's growing unpopularity appears to be directly related to the number of people who feel that she has broken those promises. The National Health Service in Britain was once the model for Europe. High-quality health care, free for everyone. Now, patients are treated in hospital corridors. There are acute shortages of beds, doctors, and nurses.
Some people can't walk, can't get upstairs to bed. There really is dreadful suffering.
More than 1 million people are now waiting for admission to hospitals, nearly half of those for more than a year. There are now waiting lists to get on the waiting list.
We can foresee a time when, when there will be a breakdown, and people can go on so long, can't they?
The British school system was once famous for its excellence. Now, British children score poorly in international surveys. Low pay is driving teachers out of the profession, leaving the field to part-time teachers. In this class, in a good London school, an interesting arithmetic test. How many teachers have they had this year?
Miss Smith, Miss Scott, Miss Parrish, Mrs.
Actually, 17 different teachers since September. Also alarming educators, 60% of British children leave school at the age of 16. That compares to 10% of Germans or Americans. And then the homeless. The sight of large numbers of people living on the streets is new in Britain. A national organization for the homeless says there are 1 million people now without permanent homes. These people, and the permanently unemployed, are part of a growing underclass in Britain. A class the Prime Minister does not even concede exists. Your critics are likely to say very often that your policies have created an underclass in this country.
I think the analysis is totally wrong. I don't recognize an underclass. It's a new word, and I think it's a commentator's word. I don't think that it ties in with reality at all.
By whatever name, in London alone, there are 50,000 homeless who are under the age of 25. Many of those are like 19-year-old Carol Wilson, who are squatters in vacant houses or live on the streets. Many of them live by begging.
Spell a bit of change, please, Will.
In recent years, the government has stopped making support payments to anyone under 18. After 2 years on the street, begging has become a way of life for Carol.
Thanks a lot, Rob.
What begins to happen is a street culture develops, and young people get sucked into that. They can't vote because they don't have an address, they don't get any welfare payments. They have nothing to lose, and I think in that situation, people do feel angry, humiliated, and desperate.
Which may account for the very un-British behavior in last month's riots and for the fears that there may be more to come. Barry Dunsmore, ABC News, London.
In other news today, the Pulitzer Prizes were awarded for journalism. The New York Times reporters Nicholas Kristof and Cheryl Wudunn for their reporting on the upheaval in China last year. The San Jose Mercury News for its coverage of the San Francisco Bay Area earthquake. And among the other awards, the playwright August Wilson won his second Pulitzer, this time for The Piano Lesson. Our final report in just a moment.
Coming soon on video cassette, Jack Lemmon, Ted Danson, Olympia Dukakis.
Where's Dad?
I don't know. Probably out pole vaulting.
Sometimes the greatest man you ever meet is the first one. Dad, coming May 10th from MCA Home Video.
Kmart puts the finishing touches on your life with the latest in fashion jewelry. The quality you need at the price you want.
Just this much Cortaid helps heal more kinds of itches and rashes than all of these. Because Cortaid has a clinically proven healing medicine they don't have. That's why Cortaid is the itch aid.
Lots of traffic on your carpet? Well, it doesn't need to show it.
Woolite Deep Cleaning Carpet Cleaner. It's specially formulated to get out tough, ground-in dirt. No fooling. Woolite. It's serious cleaning.
Chrysler announces the Guaranteed Advantage Sell-a-thon, now with all 3 savings advantages. Get a $1,000 rebate on Dodge Shadow and Spirit, or get $1,000 back on Plymouth Acclaim and Sundance. Plus special option packages and millions in factory-to-dealer incentives on all these family cars. And now, save over $1,000 on America's best-selling minivans, Plymouth Voyager and Dodge Caravan. Offer ends soon, so hurry. Join us for the biggest sell-a-thon in Chrysler's history.
3 students, 3 lives, all riding on the decisions of college administrators.
Grades alone mean nothing.
Plus tabloid photographers who will do anything to get a picture of a star.
If they're out there, they're fair game.
Watch Prime Time tonight.
Finally here this evening, the supermarket of the future. Not that long ago, a modern supermarket was one where the shopping carts had 4 wheels all rolling in the same direction. Well, things are really changing at the end of aisle 2. Here's ABC's Gary Shepard.
When you hear the beep, immediately place the item on the belt unless instructed otherwise by our video clerk.
Shopping for groceries these days is rapidly becoming a high-tech experience. In Miami, they already have customers serving as their own checkers, thanks to state-of-the-art equipment that even tells you when you've made a mistake.
Please pick up the last item and scan it again.
The future is now. From Gillette.
In Los Angeles, there are grocery displays that talk to you. And they're testing a brand new fleet of shopping carts equipped with video screens. Electronic sensors trigger a display of the latest sale items just as you're approaching them. Manufacturers pay a fee to have their products listed. 5,000 stores nationwide are expected to have them by the end of next year.
Just walking down the aisle here, and the tri-tips were on sale, $2 less a pound. That's pretty good, you know. You don't find that all that often. And had it not been on here, I wouldn't have known it.
Okay, what happens if I want to find out where the spaghetti is located here?
We're going to look up for pasta, and there we have pasta spaghetti in aisle number 12. And then when it times back out, it's going to show you where you're at in the aisle, so you know you're in aisle 2, and you're going to cruise on over to aisle number 12.
They've even figured out how to entertain you while you're in the checkout line. There's a movie guide, you can check out your horoscope, or even catch up on the latest community news.
Well, I have a computer at home, and I'm getting more comfortable with all this stuff.
In some cities, grocers have drive-through windows. You're allowed to order up to 10 items, and they promise you'll have them in less than 3 minutes without ever getting out of your car.
Thank you for coming through.
This Southern California chain is testing a frequent shopper program, not too far removed from what the airlines are doing. Instead of free flights, you get free merchandise. And who knows, maybe even an upgrade to the gourmet counter. Gary Shepard, ABC News, Los Angeles.
Scary. That's our report on World News Tonight. Tomorrow, our Person of the Week. I'm Peter Jennings. Have a good evening. Good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News, where more Americans get their news than from any other source.
Tonight, the new series that has everyone talking.
Can I ask her about her log? Many have.
It's must-see, must-tape television.
You were in love with Laura. The 2 of you were seeing each other secretly.
Twin Peaks at its regular time tonight.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin with 2 very different sides of Mikhail Gorbachev, the liberal Soviet leader who's encouraged greater independence for the sovereign nations of Eastern Europe, and the man who is increasingly tougher on those Soviet republics which are trying to win their independence. Today it was a threatening Mikhail Gorbachev who sent a letter to the Lithuanian government giving that republic 48 hours to back down from what he called unconstitutional actions or face a round of economic sanctions. In Moscow, ABC's Jim Laurie.
The letter was read to the nation on Soviet television. In it, Gorbachev complains about 3 specific so-called unconstitutional actions taken last week. He says Lithuania must stop issuing identification cards which allegedly discriminate against Russian residents. Lithuanians must stop the seizure of Soviet property, and they must resume the spring military draft. The ultimatum gives Lithuania 2 days to comply. Unless it does, the letter warns, any product that could be exported for hard currency would not be shipped to Lithuania. Items like oil, gas, coal, and lumber. Lithuania is totally dependent on the rest of the Soviet Union for vital raw materials. The move, therefore, could have a crippling effect on the economy. Reacting to the Gorbachev ultimatum tonight, Lithuanian President Vytautas Landsbergis said the Kremlin knows Lithuania cannot fulfill all its demands. Landsbergis said, though, he did not expect supplies to be cut off all at once. In addition, the Gorbachev letter again calls on Lithuania to revoke its declaration of independence, promising that only then can talks begin on a whole range of independence issues. Jim Laurie, ABC News, Moscow.
President Bush and British Prime Minister Thatcher today urged Mr. Gorbachev to call off his threat of sanctions against Lithuania. But as they spoke with reporters after a meeting in Bermuda, it was clear they couldn't do much about it. ABC's Britt Hume is there.
Word of the new Gorbachev ultimatum reached the two leaders in the midst of consultations in which Lithuania was a major topic. Both the president and the prime minister have tried to avoid comment on specific Soviet actions in the crisis, but this was a move they couldn't ignore.
The last few minutes, we were handed a deeply disturbing wire service report.
The president said there had been no time to confirm the details.
But we have been calling on Moscow publicly and privately for avoiding escalatory measures in favor of dialogue. And so I'd say here, now is no time for escalation. It's time for talk.
The two leaders were reluctant to comment further on the Gorbachev threat, but it came a day after U.S. senators visiting Moscow were told the Kremlin wanted no more lectures from the West. That did evoke a response from Mrs. Thatcher.
We're just not lecturing anyone, but we are entitled to express a view. We've frequently expressed it, that this is not a problem that should be solved by force. It therefore must be solved by discussion. We had a duty to say what we think. We still think that way.
And there was a hint from the president that his reticent approach to the Lithuania crisis springs from a belief that there may not be much the U.S. can do about it.
I know there's a great desire on the part of Americans to know what we might do, what can be done, what can the President of the United States do to force change upon somebody, and it's not that clear.
Privately, the president has repeatedly cited Hungary 1956 to illustrate what he wants to avoid here. The U.S. loudly encouraged the freedom movement that year, but had no actions to match its words when the Red Army rolled into Budapest. Britt Hume, ABC News, Southampton, Bermuda.
The other Mikhail Gorbachev today is the one who met with Polish President Wojciech Jaruzelski in Moscow to finally talk about the lies which have poisoned Soviet-Polish relations for 50 years. Today, the Soviets admitted that their secret police, under orders of the late dictator Joseph Stalin, murdered 15,000 Polish army officers in the early months of World War II. More than 4,000 of the victims died here in the Katyn forest of eastern Poland, near Smolensk, buried in a mass grave over which small pine trees and birch trees were planted. An attempt by Stalin to eliminate the best and brightest of Poland's officer corps in one bloody stroke. The trees are tall now, but they have never completely hidden the truth. Until Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviets stubbornly held to the claim that German troops were responsible for the massacre. But the world knew better. The U.S. government knew, but avoided pressing it as a public issue. In 1987, after years of pressure by Poles the world over, Mikhail Gorbachev created a joint Soviet-Polish commission to uncover the truth, which has concluded with today's admission and an official apology. A statement carried by the TASS news agency. The Soviet side expresses profound regret over the Katyn tragedy. In Poland today, a man whose father was among the victims in the Katyn forest wondered why it had taken half a century to finally write the truth into history. In a moment, Washington and the District of Columbia blaming each other for drugs in the nation's capital. And later in the broadcast, the argument over judging people by their handwriting. And on this Friday, our person of the week, someone with a critical ear for freedom. hard to come by, even in the shadow of the White House. For a year now, the federal government has tried to make Washington a showcase for its anti-drug efforts. Today, the drug czar, William Bennett, said the city is still in trouble. Here's ABC's Walter Rogers.
2:30 this morning in the nation's capital, and the 134th homicide victim this year. The murder rate remains out of control, drugs readily available, and jails overcrowded. Today, federal drug czar William Bennett stopped short of calling the drug war in Washington a failure.
I think it's fair to say the record is mixed, spotty, incomplete, not nearly as good as anyone would like.
Privately, Bennett and his aides say the war is failing because the government of Mayor Marion Barry is incompetent. The goal was to put drug dealers and users behind bars. Federal money was approved for a new jail, but the city can't even decide where to build it. And though federal funds have been made available, the district has not added a single additional bed for treatment in the last year. But city officials insist there has been some progress.
We've closed down many crack houses, over 200 crack houses in one community alone. Many of the open-air drug markets are now closed.
Whatever officials say, students here blame the city and the federal government.
I think America's losing the war on drugs because we're just not trying hard enough.
I mean, just walk down the street and you'll see deals going down.
Bennett's aides now say privately making a test case out of a city with such severe problems probably was a mistake. Walter Rogers, ABC News, Washington.
In other news, the government today relaxed restrictions on visits to the United States by people infected with the AIDS virus. The new regulations would permit them to enter the U.S. for 10 days if they are coming to attend certain events, such as an AIDS conference. The Space Agency has a message for thousands of school children around the country. Don't worry about the tomatoes from outer space. Here's ABC's Jim Slade.
The Long Duration Exposure Facility, LDEF, spent nearly 6 years in space, fully exposed to cosmic radiation. In January, Shuttle Columbia retrieved it. Among the experiments removed from LDEF were 12.5 million tomato seeds destined for American science students. They'll grow the tomatoes to see if the plants change. But today, the Los Angeles Times printed a memo written by one of the directors of NASA's field education programs. In it, he warned his employees of a remote possibility that radiation-caused mutations could cause the plants to produce toxic fruit. The memo raised such a fuss that some educational programs dropped the experiment today.
We just don't take chances with kids. We're here to provide a safe environment. And so it was decided that we certainly couldn't plant these things.
At a hastily assembled news conference, NASA managers agreed that tomatoes shouldn't be eaten, but they say that's because it would end the experiment, not because there's any radiation danger.
Safe as any tomato you'd take out of your refrigerator and put on your young people's sandwich and send them off to school with, yeah.
But we don't want to see them made into bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwiches. That's the key.
The Space Agency is sending a letter to all teachers taking part in the program emphasizing that tomatoes are safe. The NASA scientists say if asked, they'd eat the tomatoes themselves. Jim Slade, ABC News, Washington.
We'll be back in just a moment. Two items tonight which underline the difficulties of balancing the needs of the economy and the environment. In Portland, Oregon, 7,000 people, many of them loggers, demonstrated against an environmental proposal which could put many loggers out of work. The federal government wants to ban logging from huge sections of Oregon forest to save the spotted owl from extinction. In the coal fields of West Virginia and Ohio, they fear that the effort to clean up the air will cost miners their jobs. Here's ABC's Bill Greenwood.
Moundsville is in the heart of the Ohio Valley. It was first settled 158 years ago. The population is 11,000. The town sits on a huge reserve of coal that fuels the economy of the entire region. 4,500 miners work here at least 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. They bring out high sulfur coal, the dirtiest of all. The coal is used to power this generating plant with 240 employees. Its entire electric output is used by the Ormet Aluminum Company just across the Ohio River. Ormet has 2,000 workers, many of them from Moundsville. The company located here because it needed a cheap source of power. But it may lose that source. Proposed changes to the Clean Air Act would phase out the use of high sulfur coal, since it contributes to acid rain. And if that happens, all the workers in all these industries could lose their jobs.
There's low-paying jobs, but I have a family, a wife, 4 kids. It'd be rough to get a job around here and be able to make ends meet.
It's kind of frightening. I kind of like it here. If Format went out of business, then I'd, need to move. Probably have to relocate someplace where we could find another job. I doubt that I'd find one as good as I have here.
I'm 46 years old now. Most of the fellows in this area in the mines are of a comparable age. Where do they go? Where do I go? There's really nowhere in this area.
Merchants along Main Street have the same fear, since 3 out of every 4 jobs in town depend on the coal industry. The people here, like people everywhere, say they're all for clean air, but they believe the proposed new federal regulations are too inflexible.
It doesn't seem like Congress hears. We try to talk to them about what the reality of all this really means, and they don't seem to pay any attention.
Ken Tucker supported his family as a miner for 20 years and says he never thought he'd see this day.
You always figure you go turn that light switch on and there's going to be power there. And as long as there's power there, that tells me somewhere there's a coal miner out there producing coal for a power plant.
There will be coal miners, but if industry is not allowed to burn the high sulfur coal that sits under Moundsville, the miners won't be working here. Bill Greenwood, ABC News, Moundsville, West Virginia.
In some other economic news today, wholesale prices, which rose sharply earlier this year because of the weather, came back down again last month. They actually declined 0.2% thanks to lower prices for both food and energy. Overseas, the debate continues over 8 giant sections of steel tubing seized in Britain yesterday before they could be shipped to Iraq. Today, the British manufacturer said that these 8 pieces were part of a 52-section pipe, the rest of which is already in Iraq. Company officials say if you put them all together, you do not get a 131-foot-long gun, but a pipeline more than 1,000 feet long. When we come back, what your handwriting may reveal to your future boss. Report had a title. It would be What is in a Signature. Just over a year ago, Congress passed a law which forbids most companies from using lie detector tests as a way of screening new employees. Tonight, Kathleen Dulaski looks at what some employers have done as a substitute.
Dennis Baston is applying for a top job at a Wall Street investment bank.
Yes, I'm here to see Ed Dempsey. The name's Dennis Baston.
Hi, Dennis.
His interview goes well. His resume is impeccable. But what about his handwriting?
Each person for that position has to take a handwriting analysis test.
It may sound bizarre, but an estimated 5,000 companies now use handwriting analysis to judge an applicant's honesty, management skills, even susceptibility to drug abuse.
It's a very small handwriting. He's very intense. He concentrates very well. The Y's, the G's, they're straight and very, very strong, and that's one indication of determination.
Sheila Kurtz, a handwriting analyst, has never met Dennis Baston. The bank hired her to uncover personality traits that might have gone unnoticed in a job interview.
His capital I is made without any other stroke. It's just a straight line. He's very direct.
At the Handwriting Resource Corporation in Phoenix, it's all done on computer. Every slant, loop, and eye dot is entered, and the computer rates the personality in 130 ways. A psychologist phones the client with results.
The first individual has a 2 in honesty, which is low, can be untrustworthy, will deceive and mislead others.
Mark Hopper, who developed the computer model, says validity studies have proven him accurate 90% of the time.
What do you say to someone who says, I think this is a bunch of hocus pocus, this is no more accurate than astrology?
We say we got the research to verify it. We can say, speak to our clients, we can say, test this.
We did. We provided handwriting samples of 2 famous people with no clues about their identities. Of the 130 personality traits, many seemed uncannily accurate. This sample reveals a good communicator, someone who seeks power and often misses details. The person is Ronald Reagan. The second sample indicates a bright person, but one with many emotional difficulties and a lack of control. This sample is from John Hinckley, the man who shot Ronald Reagan in 1981. But several of the traits in both analyses could have applied to anyone. There are still many skeptics who say this is not the way to decide a person's future.
Your chances of
being able to weed out a problem employee are just as good by flipping a coin as they are by using handwriting samples.
While the argument goes on, most employers say they would only use handwriting analysis as one of 4 or 5 factors in a hiring decision. But at a few companies, like the bank where Dennis Baston applied, the written word is the final word. He got the job.
And I must say that it's quite a bit of a relief.
There were no unsavory secrets in his scribble.
It's done.
Kathleen Dulaski, ABC News, New York.
We'll be back in just a moment. Finally this evening, our person of the week. Someone this week who reminds us just how quickly the world is changing. The person we've chosen belongs primarily to the world of music. But in these momentous times, he's also been a street politician. Someone who's helped his fellow citizens find their way to freedom.
I was involved because I had promised that I want to do all to help to find solution for the people of our country.
Kurt Major was able to use his considerable fame and influence in East Germany, his home, to help create peaceful change where tragedy was possible. Tonight, this famous East German maestro is conducting Bach's St. Matthew's Passion in Paris. But Paris is only a stopover. From the world-renowned Gewandhaus Orchestra in Leipzig to the leadership of the New York Philharmonic, to which he was appointed this week.
He's very much a man of the world, as he demonstrated by his role in Leipzig during the revolution last year.
By October of last year, East Germany was still lagging far behind the tide of reform in Eastern Europe. But the people of Leipzig, Major among them, were increasingly fed up with the entrenched communist government of Erich Honecker. They took to the streets in the hundreds of thousands to say so. The national militia was under orders to shoot to kill. Kurt Major believed he could not stand by and do nothing. On October the 9th, he summoned the local Communist Party leaders, some of whom were old friends, to his home. He warned them, accept the inevitability of reform or have the blood of your countrymen on your hands. There was no Tiananmen Square in East Germany, no bloodbath. The demonstrations continued until the government finally fell.
Some of my friends said Kurt Masur did the same as he does always conducting an orchestra on the evening. It meant I was needed in that moment. The leadership of the city was not active enough. We feared something could happen, something very badly could happen. And so I tried to use my influence to avoid that. That was all.
The influence and leadership of a great conductor. Kurt Major was born in Silesia in 1927. It was part of Germany then. Today it belongs to Poland. His father wanted him to be an electrical engineer, but there was never a doubt that he was headed towards a career in music.
I started, as I heard my sister playing the piano, and she was taught. I was 5 years old, and I liked it, that somebody can play piano. And so I tried by myself without a teacher, and it worked out.
The critics describe him with words like solid, workmanlike, no nonsense, and tough.
Kurt Masur is very much a meat and potatoes Central European conductor in the grand tradition. Any good conductor must be traffic cop, psychiatrist, almost religious leader, inspiring the troops, general of sorts.
What means tough? I love musicians, and if I'm together in a rehearsal, I have to be tough to bring out a good concert. Music means for me to give myself the opportunity to think about life, to be alone with myself.
It is unlikely he will ever be alone in New York. a city to which he will bring tradition and discipline and honesty.
If I'm coming to New York, I come as myself, and I will try to do in future the same things, just use music to do more than entertain.
And so we choose Kurt Masur. When he was conducting in Leipzig, he was often asked to conduct in the West. He only got permission to travel regularly after he threatened to defect. The Communist Party apparently not wanting the embarrassment of such a public figure going over to the West permanently. As it turns out, that was the least of their problems. That's our report on World News Tonight. I'm Peter Jennings. Have a good weekend. Good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News, where more Americans get their news than from any other source.
Sunday. They'll be coming around my ankles when they come. Gesundheit.
And all new America's Funniest Home Videos.
Then, at a special time, Timothy Dalton stars.
From ABC News, World News Saturday. Here's Carol Simpson.
Good evening. The showdown in the independence-minded Soviet Republic of Lithuania reached a new level of tension tonight, with just hours to go before Soviet leader Gorbachev's threatened economic blockade of the republic is set to go into effect. Lithuanian officials acknowledge that a cutoff of oil, gas, and other crucial goods could cause massive layoffs. To avoid the blockade, Lithuania must rescind its declaration of independence by Sunday. As ABC's Jim Laurie reports, it doesn't appear that that's going to happen.
Reacting to the Gorbachev ultimatum, Lithuanians put on a brave face today. People went about Easter shopping as if nothing had happened.
As far as an economic blockade is concerned, I think they've been prepared for this for months and months because there have been threats.
Lithuania's leaders showed no sign of backing down and submitting to the demand to rescind the laws which have followed their declaration of independence last month. After a meeting of his cabinet, the president, Vytautas Landsbergis, said there'd be no special response to Gorbachev's embargo threat. He said a cutoff of oil would not deal Lithuania a death blow. The local oil refinery was operating normally today. It's believed Lithuania has a 3-month supply. Lines were long, but no longer than usual at gas stations. Lithuania is heavily dependent on Moscow for all its oil, gas, and coal. But sources say next week Lithuania plans to explore new sources of oil. Discussions are set to take place in Norway. There was another Baltic challenge today to Mikhail Gorbachev. In neighboring Latvia, 600 radical breakaway communists formed a new party which advocates independence and a free market economy. Mikhail Gorbachev, meanwhile, was making little progress trying to reach agreement on essential economic reforms. A meeting held with top advisors on moving to a modified market economy broke up in disagreement. Despite continued Lithuanian confidence and defiance, there is little they can do if Gorbachev embarks on a serious embargo of vital supplies. The deadline is tomorrow night, but many believe it'll be some time before any effect will actually be seen. Jim Laurie, ABC News, Moscow.
President Bush declined further comment on the situation in Lithuania today when he was questioned by reporters during a golf game. But his Secretary of State, James Baker, said the administration is taking a wait-and-see attitude. He said the American people will not be understanding if Lithuanians are deprived of basic necessities.
World News Saturday, brought to you by the makers of Advil.
New government figures show that 1989 was the worst year for tourism here in the nation's capital in 2 decades. Overall, Washington, D.C., normally a mecca for visitors from all over the world, saw tourism drop an alarming 17%. Many local officials blame that on the city's high murder rate. The story from Kathleen Delasky.
It's Easter weekend in Washington. Hordes of tourists are here to experience the gleaming monuments and museums.
We're glad to have you here on a very beautiful, sunny day in April.
By contrast, this was not part of any bus tour. Last night, a few miles from the White House, Washington's 137th murder this year.
You know what we read, it scares you, and you think about it.
The Dudleys from Vermont decided to tour Washington despite publicity about crime. But new statistics indicate that many Americans are choosing not to visit the nation's most important hub of history. Last year, 14% fewer people visited the Jefferson Memorial. Visits to the Lincoln Memorial were down 19%. To the most popular Smithsonian museums, down 13%.
It really is a tragedy because it's the best free show in the country, really.
People who run the concession stands around the monuments lost 25% of their business last year. Officials at the National Park Service downplay Washington's image problem. They say other factors must be driving some tourists away, like last year's bad weather or a softening economy.
There is quite a percentage of people that do know if they come to Washington to visit the memorials or to visit any of the museums, that they will be safe.
Tourism officials say they are doubling their efforts to fight against Washington's image, but their job is not getting any easier. Despite a federal program to rescue Washington from its drug epidemic, the murder rate is not declining. Kathleen Delaski, ABC News, Washington.
An earthquake measuring 5.1 on the Richter scale shook part of British Columbia and the state of Washington last night and temporarily closed a major U.S.-Canadian border crossing. The crossing was reopened today when engineers determined there was no structural damage to buildings on the border crossing grounds. There was more street gang violence in Los Angeles overnight. At least 5 people were killed and 6 others wounded. Gang violence and the fear of gang violence is spreading in Southern California, especially in the schools. As Jed Duvall reports, the unsuspecting can become the victims of gang violence just by wearing the wrong color.
We can't wear red because it's gang related and blue because they represent a certain gang.
In Southern California, a school's dress code has an urgent purpose beyond style. People are afraid of gangs. There are hundreds, perhaps thousands of gangs. The sheriff's department says there are 80,000 people in gangs.
Put your hands down, what are you looking at?
Gangs wear different colors, blacks, greens, browns, and others.
Each gang wears a particular color to distinguish them from themselves from other gangs.
But blue means Crips and red means Bloods, 2 vintage gangs that have grown into enormous and loose criminal federations. Chaffee High School is in a peaceful setting in Ontario, California, far from the bad gang territory of the LA ghettos. Still, school officials have made clear their fears to the students. Are there any colors that you're not supposed to wear?
Yeah, black and red.
Black and red?
We're
Why?
not supposed to wear them here at school. They can't have gang-related stuff in it.
Are they overdoing it? Making up things to be afraid of? Sergeant McBride's desk is just beneath the charts of this year's and last year's gang homicides.
A guy comes up and he happens to be wearing a blue hat. Rival gang drives up, accuses him of being a gang member. They didn't believe his denials and kill him.
It is that sort of story which has people worried about jackets, shirts, hats, and even sneakers. This business about what colors to wear and not to wear has gotten even to the train. This is the new Blue Line. It'll start operation this summer. Do you think someone has suggested that color designation be changed? You bet. Transit officials who heard the suggestion simply said no to thugs.
Heck, you know, the blue and the red are the Crips and the Bloods, but purple is another gang's color, chartreuse is another gang's color. It never stops.
Indeed, where does it stop?
Because at some point we have to quit making concessions to the gangs. And at some point we have to decide we're going to fight back, and that's the end of it.
Fight back, yes. The police fight the gangs as best they can. But who fights the fear of gangs? Who takes the first step? Jed Duvall, ABC News, Los Angeles.
Senior Pentagon sources say the Army has agreed to a plan to cut 1 soldier in 4 from the service by 1997. National Guard and Reserve units will be cut as well, although not as drastically. Sources say the cuts are a painful fiscal reality, necessary to meet demands for sharp reductions in Pentagon spending. Next week, the Census Bureau will decide how many census takers it's going to have to hire to finish up the 1990 national head count. And it looks like the Bureau is going to need a lot more of them than was first thought. So far, only 59% of the households who've received census forms have mailed them back, far less than the 70% census officials expected. More from ABC's Ron Claiborne.
What was supposed to be the most efficient and accurate population count ever has gone awry.
in part because millions of people have simply not bothered to return their census forms. Officials are concerned that many people are treating their census forms like another piece of junk mail.
We think that people are much more surveyed than they were 10 years ago. They're getting a lot more mail.
It looks like the Publishers Clearinghouse giveaway.
I have to say, I threw them out. And I feel very guilty about it.
The Census Bureau also blames the low response rate on apathy.
I'm sitting on my kitchen table under a pile of bills. Like, it's the biggest envelope there, so it's probably going to be the last one that's going to be taken care of.
Others who have failed to comply say they don't want to reveal such intimately personal details.
I'm suspicious of giving that much information to the government.
In some ways, there is a measure of lack of trust in government. People need to understand that the census is entirely confidential, that no other government agency can have access to census information.
There are some curious patterns. Large states on both coasts, like California and New York, have low response rates, while in Midwest states, such as Ohio and Indiana, a larger percentage have turned in their forms. In some cities, poor people and minorities, groups that historically have low compliance, were more responsive than residents of wealthy white neighborhoods. Whoever they are, wherever they are, many of the people who have not turned in their census forms have one thing in common. They just don't believe it's that important. Ron Claiborne, ABC News, New York.
People all over the world are gearing up for observance of the 20th anniversary of Earth Day. Events drawing attention to the environment begin next week and will culminate in an international celebration next Sunday, April 22nd. 20 years ago, concern for the environment was pretty much confined to a small but highly vocal group of citizen activists. But lately, as Cokie Roberts reports, public officials have joined the bandwagon.
During the presidential campaign, George Bush made his position abundantly clear.
And I am an environmentalist, and I always have been, and I always will be.
Bush was not only taking on his opponent, attacking Dukakis as the polluter of Boston Harbor, the then vice president was also separating himself from the policies of his president. Reagan handed over the environmental issue to Democrats by his controversial appointments and statements, and President Bush is still trying to dispel the image reflected in public opinion polls that Democrats do a better job in protecting the environment.
Stewardship, the safekeeping of America's precious environmental inheritance.
Republican strategists see the environment as fertile ground to plow, especially with younger voters.
Voters expected the Democratic Party to do more than Republicans, but George Bush is changing that, and I think he's getting a lot of credit for his efforts on the environment.
Among the efforts, elevation of the Environmental Protection Agency to a cabinet-level position, a commitment to plant 1 billion trees a year, and drafting of a clean air bill.
The Bush administration has decided in a very conscious political way that the environmental issue is one where they don't want to be seen as being on the wrong side.
By endorsing the first rewrite of the Clean Air Bill in 17 years, the president encouraged various regional interests to come together. Even powerful Democrats representing coal, mining, and industrial areas were forced to give way to the environmental tide, despite their concerns.
We're being compelled to compete against nations where they do not have attention to the environment. Japan's environment stinks.
But Dingell knows that areas like his hometown of Detroit have lost political clout as the population has shifted south and west.
People get out of the Northeast and Midwest where manufacturing and jobs and sort of the losers in the environmental debate being heavy industry, where that's less important to them and their lifestyle is more important.
To woo those voters, both parties are trying to claim the environmental high ground, leading lobbying groups to keep up the pressure.
The public, as far as we can tell, is demanding stronger action, and they're not getting it.
Environmentalists are now in the happy position of playing the political parties off against each other, while President Bush tries to wipe out the Reagan legacy and claim the cause for the Republicans, and the Democrats hope to hold on to an issue that was traditionally their own. Cokie Roberts, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
Threats to the environment and the shaping of public policy to deal with those threats will be the topic tomorrow on ABC's This Week with David Brinkley. Guests will include William Riley, head of the Environmental Protection Agency, and Dennis Hayes, chairman of Earth Day 1990.
Each year, millions of people send money with Western Union, and for good reason. We not only invented the business of sending money, we've been perfecting it ever since. So when you send money with us, you can be sure it will get there, usually in 15 minutes or less. Of course, you could try using someone else. You could also go clam digging in a minefield. Western Union. Why even consider anyone else?
Anything to declare?
Diarrhea.
Oh, permit me.
Kaopectate.
But of course.
Now, advanced formula Kaopectate. Just this much relieves diarrhea and cramps fast.
Vive la Kaopectate!
Le diarrhea specialist.
This rare 19th century painting is too fragile for ordinary transportation, so they called United Van Lines. And when Kevin Anderson's family needed someone to move the things they treasured most, they called United Van Lines. United, America's #1 family mover.
Spring is prime home selling season because there are more buyers in the market, more reasons than ever to put your trust in the Century 21 system. We have access to more buyers through our referral network of 6,000 offices nationwide. The exclusive Action Warranty puts a promise of service in writing. And year in, year out, no one sells more homes. So if you're ready to sell, now's the time to call your local Century 21 office.
Century 21. We built this business
to give you vision, style.
Built this business
to help entertain you.
We built this business to build your freedom.
ITT built these businesses into leaders. We built them by taking care of people.
And we built this business. We built this business to build your dreams. Built this business.
Now let's go to Dick Schaap in New York. He's sitting in for Ray Gandolf, and he's got a look at how the ponies ran in Lexington, Kentucky, and the rest of today's sports highlights. Dick?
Thank you, Carol. The Kentucky Derby picture, which seemed bleak not long ago, brightened considerably today. Summer Squall on the rail, ridden by Pat Day, captured the Bluegrass Stakes at Keeneland, his 7th victory in 8 starts. A strong stretch run marking him a contender, along with the undefeated colts Mr. Frisky and Champagne for Ashley in next month's Derby. From thoroughbred racing to harness racing and to a most durable athlete, Delvin Miller. Gordie Howe played big league hockey in 5 decades. George Blanda big league football in 4. But next to Miller, they were just flashes in the pan. In October 1929, when Babe Ruth was the home run king of baseball and the stock market came crashing down, Delvin Miller drove his first harness race. Your first race in 1929, you won $9, is that right?
$9, I think. Am I hooked up here?
Now, 61 years, thousands of victories, and millions of dollars later, Delvin Glenn Miller, at 76, is still driving harness races. He is the enduring superstar of his game.
Oh, good grief. He's a Joe DiMaggio of the business he's in, let's face it.
Delvin Miller is DiMaggio and more. Champion driver, champion trainer, champion breeder, champion human being, and champion name dropper. He has been everywhere, met everyone.
Yes, I went fishing with Babe Ruth. I got a picture of Jesse Owens and Ty Cobb and myself. And somebody introduced me to George Patton. He was a good horseman.
Miller has met 5 presidents. He recalls one conversation.
He said, you know, I made a speech at Gettysburg today and...
No, not that speech at Gettysburg. Miller was talking with Lyndon, not Lincoln. Miller's driving career, starting in the 20s, capped in 1950 by this victory in the Hambletonian, the most prestigious of harness races, soared last night into its 8th decade, the 90s. Delvin Miller drove his first races of the year at Florida's Pompano Harness Track. It was Delvin Miller night at Pompano, marked by a party that drew hundreds of his friends, including 3 celebrated athletes, each, like Miller himself, a Hall of Famer, like jockey Eddie Arcaro. Did you think he'd keep racing this long?
Knowing him, yes. Yeah, I think he should never quit.
Pitcher Whitey Ford, who has co-owned horses with Miller and Mickey Mantle, offered a clue to Delvin's longevity.
Because he didn't abuse himself like Mickey and I did.
And when Delvin donned his brown and gold silks, friend and business partner Arnold Palmer cheered him on.
Oh, I'm not going to bet a great deal, but I'm going to bet on him because I know one thing. If I ever bet on anybody that gave me the same shot that Delvin Miller gives me, you can't lose, even if you lose.
Delvin drove 2 of his 3 races magnificently, bringing a pair of long shots home in the money. 1/3, 1 second. Of course, he would have liked to have won, but Delvin Miller had no complaints.
So if I don't win, hey, listen, I've walked out of there many a time and I didn't win and I'm still happy.
Delvin Miller is a happy man, and 2 of Arnold Palmer's other old friends and rivals are also happy today. Gary Player birdied 8 of the first 10 holes to take sole possession of first place after 3 rounds of the Senior PGA Championship, 5 strokes in front of Jack Nicklaus, who is trying to make his record 2 for 2 as an over 50 athlete. Lee Trevino is in 3rd place, not a bad day for aging athletes. Of course, summer squall brings down the average age. Carol?
Thanks, Dick. When we come back, a new invasion on the Normandy coast.
Mr. Green has a mower he purchased brand new. Oh, the wonderful things he thought it would do. But it sputtered, it coughed, it gave quite a wheeze. And mowing the yard was not such a breeze. And so when the time came to buy something new, Mr. Green bought a snapper, and so should you. For your yard and your garden, these snappers, you see, take mowing and grooming more seriously. And now when he mows, Mr. Green is seen with something we'd call a serious machine.
My husband, Elliot, he's an inventor. He's made a very good life for both of us. Last year, this big company paid a lot of money for one of his ideas. Elliot even thought about opening his own company, but in the end, we decided to invest the money. Besides, I'm not sure Elliot's cut out to work in an office anyway.
To invest tax-free with John Newbean and Company, call your financial advisor or this number.
To celebrate Earth Day 1990, ABC News will examine our progress in environmental conservation around the country. Watch Peter Jennings on World News Tonight next week.
Finally tonight, a lesson in turning something old and unpleasant into something new and inviting. During World War II, the German army built bunkers to house its soldiers along the French coastline. Now the French, in their own inimitable way, have taken those bunkers and made them, well, Don Gladstrup explains.
The French coast of Normandy, the kind of setting that inspires artists and attracts tourists. But it wasn't so long ago that this area, with its magnificent view, drew a different kind of sightseer.
Nazi eyes scanned the near-white cliffs of Dover.
The year 1944, just before D-Day, as the German High Command turned this part of occupied France into a wall of giant guns and concrete bunkers.
Apprehensive of the growing might of the Allies in the West, they built their Atlantic Wall, a coastal Maginot Line. It emphasizes the German swing over from the offensive to the defensive state of mind.
But when the invasion finally came, the German defense crumbled. Most of the bunkers were destroyed. Most, but not all. Those that survived have done so in ways no German soldier could have imagined. Welcome to Andre Repoussy's home. Actually, his home away from home, his vacation hideaway. This is where he comes to get away from it all. It's so peaceful here, he says, not like it used to be. It gives me peace of mind. Andre's neighbor, Henri Mazel, knows the feeling. While he relaxes outside, his wife does the same inside. But it's not only homes bunkers are being used for. This one's being turned into a hotel. The pool is already in. This bunker is a discotheque. Except for a slight humidity problem, it's perfect for dancing, dining, all kinds of celebrations. But the celebrating could soon end.
It took an international armada to remove the previous tenants. Today, it's being done the easy way. Having decided these bunkers should be preserved as historical monuments, the French government has announced it will no longer renew the leases that permit people to live in them.
For Roger and Nicole Johnson, it's unconditional surrender. What can we do, he asks. We've been living in a time warp anyway. When they first moved in, claustrophobia was the first enemy. The second was ghosts from the past. There were always memories of the war, says Nicole. We kept remembering what happened. Then, after a while, we began to forget and started living normally. What the government wants is to make sure no one forgets, to preserve these structures, not for parties, dancers, or weekenders, but for the memories and the history which haunts them. Don Cladstrup, ABC News, Normandy.
And that's our report for tonight. Britt Hume will have more news later on the Weekend Report. I'm Carol Simpson. For all of us here at ABC News, good night and have a happy Easter.
From Washington, this has been World News Saturday.
This has been a presentation of ABC News, where more Americans get their news than from any other source.
Grooming more seriously. And now when he mows, Mr. Green is seen with something we'd call a serious machine.
For over 1,000 new cars, trucks, and vans, follow this little guy to Arrow Chevrolet and Arrow Chrysler Plymouth, where you can always choose from the lowest financing and largest rebates available. Hi, I'm Kerry Frank, General Manager of Arrow Chevrolet and Arrow Chrysler Plymouth. And with our special spring purchases, you can buy a new Chevrolet or Chrysler Plymouth, car, truck, or van at one of the lowest prices of the year. So for better selection, bigger savings, and no waiting, it's Arrow Chevrolet and Arrow Chrysler Plymouth, both at 147th and Cicero.
Frank Matthews, Jever Wonder, Monday at 10 on Eyewitness News.
From ABC News, World News Sunday. Sitting in for Forrest Sawyer, here's Carol Simpson.
Good evening. Today was the deadline for the Republic of Lithuania to respond to Soviet leader Gorbachev's grim ultimatum: back away from Declaration of Independence or face a potentially devastating economic blockade. But the people of Lithuania spent this Sunday ignoring the Kremlin and celebrating Easter. ABC's Jim Laurie reports.
Lithuania today waited out Moscow's deadline in prayer. The largely Roman Catholic Republic went to Easter Mass, including President Vytautas Landsbergis, who says he'll not call a session of Parliament to discuss Mikhail Gorbachev's ultimatum until after the holiday on Tuesday. Lithuania's top cleric, Cardinal Vincent Sladkevičius, in a TV address, preached calm and unity. Don't have doubts about independence, he said. Even if we are suppressed for the moment, our efforts will eventually bear fruit. Lithuania's leaders have advised people to enjoy their holiday and not worry, even though they now face a possible cutoff by Moscow of all oil, gas, and coal supplies. People again today were lining up buying gasoline, extra cans just in case. Although the deadline has now passed and Lithuania has made no move to respond, most expect any embargo to take some time to have effect. Meanwhile, in Moscow, the deadline passed without further word from the Kremlin, but a commentary in the Communist Party daily Pravda warned Washington against further interference in the strictly internal matter of Lithuania. It would be reckless, said Pravda, to throw worldwide perestroika under the feet of Lithuanian nationalists who have lost their sense of reality and responsibility. Despite the gloomy prospects, there are signs of possible concessions. Gorbachev has not specifically demanded the repeal of the Independence Declaration, but rather so-called unconstitutional laws that back it up. In that, Lithuanians say there may be room for compromise. Jim Laurie, ABC News, Moscow.
Easter was celebrated throughout the Christian world today, but the observances took on a special significance in Eastern Europe, in countries that until recently were under communist rule. Religious holidays could not be celebrated publicly until now. Concern about the political showdown in Lithuania dominated the traditional Easter Mass at St. Peter's Square, as Hilary Bowker reports.
During his Easter address in Rome today, Pope John Paul prayed for peace in Lithuania. He said he hoped its aspirations are confirmed through a respectful and comprehensive dialogue. In the Soviet Union, Easter masses drew huge congregations in Christian-populated republics where the church and religion are often linked with nationalism. In Berlin, thousands of East Germans poured into the West to take part in the traditional Easter peace rally, the first to bring people from both sides of the still divided city together.
It's also symbolic of joining the forces of people, of the power to come together to make peace. And therefore, I think it's a great symbol.
While demonstrators called for a Berlin without walls and a Germany without weapons, others chose to celebrate East Berlin's first free Easter in church. The fall of communism in Eastern Europe has meant that people have been allowed to celebrate Easter openly for the first time in decades. In Bulgaria, crowds of people packed the streets for a pre-dawn mass that became an anti-communist demonstration. Elsewhere, churches overflowed with Bulgarians who until now have been afraid to worship freely. And the fear is gone in Romania, where people took a holiday from politics and embraced religion. Going to church is no longer forbidden for the police and army as it was under Ceausescu. As in much of Eastern Europe, Easter in Romania has come to symbolize the revival of democracy. Hilary Bowker, ABC News.
Today is the first anniversary of the student-led pro-democracy movement in China. 1 year ago today, liberal Chinese leader Hu Yaobang died. It was his death that sparked marches and demonstrations which ended with a violent crackdown in Tiananmen Square. Hundreds of police were in the square today on the lookout for trouble. Todd Carroll is in Beijing.
The authorities were so fearful that a single spark could ignite another round of protests that they arrested this man, who brought in white flowers of mourning. His gesture was intended to commemorate Hu Yaobang's death and hail those who died at the end of last year's demonstration. On the huge Tiananmen Square, singing soldiers marched around in formation throughout the day. All the troops and police are standing guard against a resurrection, ready to do whatever it takes to make sure that the spirit of a dead leader and a protest movement is not revived. The square was technically open, though many of those who showed up were from out of town. Even runners in a special marathon strode through a city ringed with troops. A child began her day with a prayer as Catholics gathered at their church to celebrate Easter Mass. They were permitted to practice their faith, albeit under police guard. The campuses here seem placid today, with most students apparently too intimidated to protest again. Still, trucks packed with troops moved on the streets nearby. Reflecting on this, one Chinese quoted an ancient saying, "When the intellectuals face soldiers, reason is useless." Another said bitterly, "China is now run by a government of gangsters." Todd Carroll, ABC News, Beijing.
In our next segment, knowing when to say when it comes to protecting the environment.
World News Sunday, brought to you by Maxwell House Coffee.
We had so little time left in France, but we savored the richness of this instant as though it would last forever.
Maxwell House introduces Rich French Roast Instant Coffee. Rich coffee roasted the French way. No instant has ever felt such romance. New Maxwell House Rich French Roast Instant, regular or decaffeinated. We can't give you France, but we'll give you the flavor.
We built this business
to help you relax and unwind.
Built this business
to bring water to your home.
We built this business to build your life.
ITT built these businesses into leaders. We built them by taking care of people.
And we built this business. We built this business to build your dreams. Built this business.
President Bush will convene an international conference on global warming here in Washington this week. This as organizers gear up for next Sunday's Earth Day 1990, a worldwide event to raise public consciousness about problems plaguing the environment. Environmental concerns are not as simple as they once were, and as Kathleen Delaski reports, neither is shaping public policy to address those concerns.
When the first Earth Day was organized in 1970, 20 million Americans took a stand against pollution. They focused on basic problems like raw sewage dumping and leaded gasoline. For this year's Earth Day, the concerns are much more complicated. Global warming is the biggest issue for many environmentalists. But today on This Week with David Brinkley, scientists were still debating whether it's even happening.
That if we let fossil fuel burning continue as we are now, that by the end of the next century, Earth could be 9 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than today.
As a result, some scientists say many fertile areas could one day be deserts, and coastal areas like New York could be underwater. But other scientists say those projections are wrong, and there is no reason to spend a lot of money reducing carbon dioxide emissions, a major cause of global warming.
It's a very real possibility, given the way that the data is running, that we could wind up with an impoverished nation waiting a warming that never comes.
The Bush administration is not choosing sides.
We have to be cautious, careful, and take out something of an insurance policy.
At the Global Warming Conference here this week, President Bush is expected to tell other countries that more research is needed before any dramatic steps are taken. Kathleen Dulaski, ABC News, Washington.
When it comes to protecting the environment, how much is too much? In an unusual twist, scientists in California are challenging the wisdom of an environmental protection law enacted by Congress, saying it goes much too far in the effort to keep the Pacific Ocean clean. That story from Jed Duval.
Water in the fountains, water for the thousands of new houses going up, water for surfers and sailors and bathers, plenty of water around San Diego, much of it carrying sewage into the ocean.
You know, people think toilets, oh my God, you know, it's got to be dirty. And of course, it is dirty.
Yes, all those toilets are flushed every day, and the treated sewage flows through a pipe into the sea.
It doesn't really sound right, does it? 190 million gallons of sewage every day just off the beach. But those who say it is all right are distinguished scientists of extraordinary reputation.
The pipe goes out 2 miles offshore and empties at a depth of 200 feet. The toxics and 80% of the solids have been removed, and fish and plant life there are abundant.
Certain amounts of sewage spread well over large areas, in other words, so they're well diluted, are in fact simply an addition of nutrients to the ocean.
Dr. Tegner, a marine biologist, is one of several distinguished scientists on the staff of the famed Scripps Institution of Oceanography, who thinks the San Diego outflow pipe is fine the way it is.
I've been working in the Point Loma kelp forest for the last 16 years.
Diving in it.
Diving in it.
This is their lab. If there's anyone that I'm aware of in the world that would be more concerned about the quality of this ocean environment, it would be these scientists at Scripps.
San Diego cleans its wastewater with advanced primary treatment, technology that wasn't even designed 18 years ago when the Clean Water Act required that cities go to secondary sewage treatment.
What secondary treatment does is it basically removes more stuff from the effluent that comes from these treatment plants. And that's always going to be better than primary treatment or advanced primary treatment.
The folks at Scripps say the price is too high.
Going to secondary treatment, which is an enormous increment in cost, will bring only a very small marginal increment in benefit to this habitat.
Even so, the money will be spent at big new treatment plants built under an agreement the city has signed with the state and federal governments.
There are a lot of people who used to believe that the ocean can take almost immeasurable impact from environmental damage and other damage. That isn't the case on land, and it's not going to be the case in the ocean either.
The water here is safe for surfing and swimming. Still, at the federal government's prodding, San Diego will go ahead with expensive further treatment unless Congress changes the Clean Water Act and, in doing so, listens to the scientists who say, don't fix it, because it ain't broke. Jed Duval, ABC News, San Diego.
Senator Spark Matsunaga of Hawaii is dead. The 73-year-old Democrat had been undergoing treatment for prostate cancer at a Toronto clinic. The longtime lawmaker may be best remembered for being a champion of Japanese Americans who sought compensation for their internment during World War II.
A lot of movers these days talk about price rather than service. But do you really want the lowest bidder to move your valued possessions? Making quality service affordable has made United America's #1 family mover, because there's no substitute for the extra protection of our exclusive sanitized treated vans. Our guaranteed on-time deliveries are the helpful facts we provide about your new city. At United, the only thing we have to sell is service, and the quality shows in every move we make.
Did you know that even though your 800 service is working perfectly, something could keep you from getting calls? But only AT&T automatically covers you with our 800 assurance policy. Within 1 hour, we can reroute 800 calls to any working phone and any other office, guaranteed. Reliability, another AT&T advantage. Call today about our special 800 offer.
Proud, make you look beautiful, do it for yourself with Minwax and Wood.
Get beautiful color with Minwax Wood Finish and lasting protection with Minwax Polyurethane.
So do yourself proud with Minwax and Wood.
When you smiling, yeah, when you smiling, the whole world.
It's hard to smile when your teeth hurt. So before your dog gets tooth and gum disease caused by plaque and tartar buildup, start him on new tartar control biscuits and rawhide strips from Milkbone. TC biscuits are clinically shown to help fight tartar buildup. Give your dog something to smile about.
When you smiling.
In South Africa today, black factional fighting raged in Natal province, producing one of the highest casualty figures there yet. At least 22 people were killed, including a soldier who was patrolling as part of stepped-up security measures there. Black-on-black violence has plagued Natal since 1986 as rival black groups battle for supremacy. As Don Kladstrup reports, the violence only grows worse.
For some, the nightmare is over. We never learned her name, nor can we ever fully understand how her daughter and family felt when they found her bullet-riddled body, slumped in the corner of their home.
It's my mother's.
It's my mother, she says. But words cannot begin to describe the suffering here. Every day it gets worse. Every day more houses are burned. Every day more lives are destroyed.
We don't know what you're going to do. We don't know what you're going to do. And I don't know who's going to help us.
In fact, very little help is in sight. Despite the presence of Army troops and the arrival of an elite combat unit known as the Terrible Ones, the circle of violence is widening. In just 3 months, more people have been killed in Natal than in Northern Ireland in the past 3 years. Increasingly, survivors are being turned into refugees. Nearly 15,000 people have fled their homes. Better to move out than be burned out. Result, whole areas have become ghost towns.
There is no law in the township, there is no order. And the only law that seems to operate is that of might is right.
What began as a power struggle between rival factions for control of the townships has degenerated into open warfare beyond any leader's control.
Power struggle part has been essentially submerged by the struggle of people who are trapped in poverty, who are trying to right ancient grievances, who are simply looking for the emotional gratification of killing and mayhem, almost as a teenage sport.
We don't know what the hell is happening in our township. We've lost lives, lost our property, our clothing. As you can see me, I was just left with this. Nothing else. My house was burnt. I've got nothing.
In a cemetery overlooking what they call the Valley of Death, prayers were sung for 15 more victims this past week. It was one of the biggest funerals ever here, and a grim reminder that before blacks can reach a settlement with whites, they must first bury differences with each other. Don Kladstrup, ABC News, in Natal.
Years ago, when minor arthritis pain made it hard to button my grandson's coat, my doctor recommended the pain reliever and prescription Motrin. Today, he recommends Motrin IB.
Motrin IB. No prescription needed.
Motrin IB gives me powerful relief from minor arthritis pain.
One Motrin IB is as effective as 2 regular aspirin.
My pain and its stiffness just go away, and it's much gentler on my stomach.
Motrin IB, doctor-recommended pain relief.
Yeah.
Hi, Steve.
Susan? Susan?
Dining alone.
Oh, yeah, making a little pasta salad.
I love pasta salad.
You do? Well, I got tomatoes.
Yeah.
I got onions. I got milk. Oh, no, great. No Miracle Whip.
Really?
Good, Susan. Susan?
A salad just isn't a salad without the tangy zip of Miracle Whip or Miracle Whip Light.
Ring. Come on, Ring.
When choosing a new car, don't compromise. Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme SL is longer and wider, yet accelerates faster than Ford Taurus. It's more powerful, yet gets better highway gas mileage than Honda Accord. And it has a better owner satisfaction plan than both, which obviously makes Cutlass Supreme the smarter choice, all the way around.
This is the new generation of Olds.
Now get up to $2,600 cash back on a 1990 Cutlass Supreme. See your Olds dealer today.
The day may come when every freestanding range will have a smooth, sealed-in surface that's easy to clean and heats up this fast. But Whirlpool has it today.
Are your teeth sensitive? Do they hurt? Sensodyne toothpaste can help stop the domino effect that can start with sensitivity. Then pain can make you stop brushing and can lead to tooth loss. Sensodyne toothpaste helps stop the pain and the domino effect.
To celebrate Earth Day 1990, ABC News will examine our progress in environmental conservation around the country. Watch Peter Jennings on World News Tonight this week.
Now let's go to Dick Schaap in New York. He's sitting in for Ray Gandolf with a look at the triumphant return of tennis pro Steffi Graf, along with the rest of today's sports highlights. Dick?
Thank you, Carol. Steffi Graf, who seems to have recovered from a ski injury, and Lou Piniella, who seems to have recovered from George Steinbrenner, are both still undefeated in 1990. Graf extended her winning streak to 57 matches stretching back to last year as she dispatched Arantxa Sanchez Vicario 6-1 and 6-love. Pinella's Cincinnati Reds extended their winning streak to 5 games. Eric Davis's first tournament of the year, helping the Reds come from behind to batter the Atlanta Braves. Cincinnati is the only unbeaten team after baseball's first week, but probably is not baseball's best team. Oakland probably is. The A's, however, are neither unbeaten nor unbeatable. They have already lost once and most likely will lose again. Not since Reggie Jackson wore an Oakland uniform in the early 1970s have the A's won 3 straight American League championships. Not since Reggie Jackson wore a New York Yankee uniform in the late 1970s has any team won 2 straight World Series. Why? Reggie Jackson will tell you the answer is obvious. Tony La Russa offers a more modest explanation.
You get a little comfortable with success. And if you're the next year not digging as deep, if you're not quite as hungry, all those little things that you did the year before to make it come together get away from you or you take for granted.
Oakland's Jamie Quirk used to play for Kansas City. He knows what La Russa means.
I played in '85 for a world champion, and in '86 we stunk, and I don't see that happening over here.
La Russa is the main reason complacency is unlikely to strike the A's, who are in position to win a 3rd straight American League championship and a 2nd straight World Series.
He's been honest with me, and he's been straightforward from the very first day, and, I bust my for the man.
La Russa may be the best manager in baseball. Intelligent, intense, insightful, and occasionally coy.
Who knows? Maybe Felix. Maybe not.
He can even be evasive in 2 languages.
Eso es más que coincidencia.
He may also be surrounded by the best athletes. From speedy Ricky Henderson, who even at a solid 190 pounds looks small among his massive teammates. Dave Henderson, Mark McGuire, Jose Canseco, all 220 pounds or more.
Whoa. And it settles into the upper deck.
Oh, my goodness. The toughness that these guys have and the strength and coordination, I don't think there's a sport that they couldn't handle.
You'd like to play the 49ers?
Yeah, I'd like to play the 49ers if they'd play us baseball in response.
I'd like to play them because I love football.
You'd like to play them in football?
Sure. I'm a better football player than I'm a baseball player anyway.
No, he's crazy. Those guys would kill us.
No.
No. I've seen them in person, and they're a little too big.
I don't know about play the 49ers. I wouldn't mind getting in there and trying my luck with the 76ers or the Detroit Pistons.
First, however, the A's will concentrate on the Kansas City Royals and the California Angels, their rivals in the best division in baseball, perhaps ever. That division also has on its theoretically lesser teams such players as Nolan Ryan, Kirby Puckett, and Ken Griffey Jr. That's two generations of superstars. Carol?
Thanks, Dick. When we come back, patching together pieces of history.
We built this business
to help ensure your dreams,
built this business
to make you feel safe and secure.
We built this business to build your future.
ITT built these businesses into leaders. We built them by taking care of people.
We built this business. We built this business to build your dreams. Built this business.
There's the part of me that says I should be above being concerned about looking older. Then there's the real me. There's the part that says, who cares about a few little lines? Then there's the real me.
Oil of Olay, so like the fluid in young skin, it penetrates in a flash to smooth, soften.
There's the part that says, oh, just grow old gracefully. Then there's the real me that says, why?
It's funny what happens when you give people what they want.
The nice part about our show is that you're just yourself.
Good Morning America, first in the morning.
Finally tonight, old clay pots, ancient eating utensils, primitive works of art. All objects that were commonplace in their day, but now are artifacts crucial to understanding societies that have died away. Historians are now beginning to appreciate the importance of another kind of artifact, one that's providing insight into a neglected part of American history. And it's the product of a common art form that's still being practiced today. The story from Linda Patillo.
Once a week, the Daughters of Dorcas turn an inner-city church basement into a modern-day quilting bee. Taking their name from the biblical character who sewed for the poor, these women also sew for charity. But more importantly, like their mothers and grandmothers before them, they sew to pass on a part of themselves to future generations.
I always wanted to do something so somebody would know when I'm gone that I have lived. And I'm doing a few things now that hopefully will be here hundreds of years when I'm gone.
This quilt is part of an exhibit called Stitched from the Soul. Quilts made before the Civil War by slave seamstresses are now traveling to museums across the country. They provide a rare look back in Black history to slavery. These quilts are among the few slave artifacts that exist today. Almost everything else was destroyed during the Civil War or left behind after emancipation.
Sometimes the quilts were made out of old clothes, a piece of Grandpa's bandana or a piece of overalls or an old dress. In the absence of reading and writing, often this was the one link to a family history. The quilts became a kind of diary on which slave women recorded their thoughts. Slaves had so few resources that the quilts became a kind of bond that were handed down from one generation to the next, along with wonderful family stories.
Such stories, along with more than 100 quilts, were passed on to Alfonso Biggs by his great-grandmother, Phyllis Biggs, a slave.
She said, my art, my religion, will be a memorial for future generations. Don't throw those things away.
Now, 78 years after her death, one of Phyllis Biggs' quilts is part of the traveling exhibit.
Her truth, her work is marching on. And you know, I am happy.
More than a century after Phyllis Biggs stitched together her patches of personal history, these women do the same, generations connected by a common thread. Linda Patillo, ABC News, Washington.
That's our report for tonight. Jack Smith will have more news later on the Weekend Report. I'm Carol Simpson. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
From Washington, this has been World News Sunday. The American Agenda, weekdays on World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
This has been a presentation of ABC News, where more Americans get their news than from any other source.
Sunday, the network television premiere.
Who are you?
Bond, James Bond. The Living Daylights. Brace yourself. Sunday at 8:30, 7:30 Central.
When you want news, turn to Channel 7 and the Eyewitness News Team. To start the day informed, stay on top of the news and take a look behind the headlines. With stories that matter to you and your family, where you live and where you work. To get a clear and accurate picture of the days ahead. Covering the events you want to know more about. The Channel 7 Eyewitness News Team. When you want news.
The Answer. That's our news.
Thanks for joining us. Good night.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin tonight with a waiting game the world is watching. Mikhail Gorbachev's 48-hour deadline to Lithuania has come and gone. And the Lithuanians have not abandoned the three key steps they've taken towards independence: their own ID cards, a refusal to register for the Soviet draft, and the position that all property in Lithuania belongs to Lithuanians. Yet so far, Moscow has done nothing to cut off gas and oil and other vital supplies to the Lithuanian Republic. Today, the Lithuanian government met to debate what it should do next. ABC's Jim Laurie is in Moscow.
After the meeting, the Lithuanian government responded by sending Mikhail Gorbachev a telegram. It appealed to him to hold immediate talks on the key issues which prompted the threatened trade sanctions. President Vytautas Landsbergis is suggesting Lithuania was prepared for concessions.
We can go to compromises in very much questions, excluding only the question of independence.
In his cable on Friday, Gorbachev did not specifically call for the repeal of the Independence Declaration. He did demand retraction of Lithuania's new identification cards, compliance with the military draft, and obedience to Soviet property laws. In a further note of conciliation tonight, Lithuania's prime minister on national television promised Lithuania would not retaliate by cutting off shipments of manufactured goods to the rest of the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, at Moscow's main depot for truck traffic, cargo was moving out as usual, carrying machinery, oil, and other vital supplies to Lithuania. Despite the deadline, which expired last night, there is no sign yet that an embargo is about to begin. Faced with sanctions, Lithuania is in fact helpless. Factories could only operate 2 weeks without vital supplies, so compromise on anything but independence itself seems the only way to avoid a damaging embargo. Jim Laurie, ABC News, Moscow.
The State Department interpreted today's news from Lithuania as good news. But what will the Bush administration do if Mr. Gorbachev decides to go ahead with his sanctions? Here's ABC's John McCarthy.
In public, the State Department refused to talk about a possible U.S. response.
We are not going to discuss or hypothesize with you what we may or may not do, actions we may or may not take, and options we may or may not pursue.
Still, administration officials say the U.S. does have a list of options, all aimed at inflicting economic pain on the Soviet Union should that be necessary. At the top of the list is the trade agreement that President Bush proposed 4 months ago at the Malta summit as a major step toward improving relations. The agreement would give Moscow low tariffs in trading with the U.S. Officials say a slowdown or cancellation of these talks is possible. Also in jeopardy are expanded landing rights for Soviet and American airlines, a broader agreement on shipping and use of ports, plus technical agreements on investment and taxes. U.S. officials say there are no plans to stop grain sales to the Soviets or to suspend arms control talks because in these areas, the U.S. has as much to lose as do the Soviets. So if the Kremlin moves against Lithuania, American strategy will be to deny Gorbachev what he badly needs, closer ties to the world's largest economy. American officials concede this alone may not deter Gorbachev, but they hope it will be a factor as he weighs his options. John McWethy, ABC News, the State Department.
In a moment, the other news, art and obscenity in Cincinnati, which is which, will now be decided in court. And later in the broadcast, the Christian Science Church in trouble over money and membership, and a very effective martial arts weapon in the hands of the police.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, brought to you by Milk-Bone Pet Snacks.
Zora from holding school dances. Fundamentalist Christians in Purdy called the dances satanic, and they had the votes on the school board to outlaw them. A lower court ruled that they had every right to do so, and the Supreme Court has let that ruling stand. In a Cincinnati courtroom today, lawyers for a local art museum and its director pleaded not guilty to obscenity charges. It is the latest development in a running battle with the censors over the display of photographs by the late Robert Mapplethorpe. It is now a couple of weeks since this artistic storm erupted over Cincinnati, a city in the heartland we once heard described as having soft charm. As ABC's Charles Thomas reports, the Mapplethorpe exhibit is having an impact on the city's self-image.
Guilty plea sparked demonstrations of support outside the courthouse. The protesters claim to represent the majority of Cincinnatians who support the museum.
They just don't want to believe that Cincinnati is not as conservative as they hope.
Cincinnati's conservative image developed in the 1970s when local officials began a drive to rid the city of adult bookstores and theaters. The most publicized episode was the prosecution of Hustler magazine publisher Larry Flint. The drive was led by former prosecutor Simon Lease, who is now the Hamilton County Sheriff. He wants the Mapplethorpe exhibit shut down to uphold Cincinnati's wholesome image.
We're free of adult bookstores, massage parlors, movie houses. We have none of that this day.
Say no to Simon Lease. Say no to the art police.
But anti-censorship forces say this time Lease has gone too far by equating an art museum with an adult bookstore.
It's hard to rally around a XXX bookstore, but I think it's a lot easier to rally around a museum or a ballet or a playhouse.
The rally cry was heard loud and clear in a poll released last week. It showed 60% of Cincinnatians supported the museum's right to show the Mapplethorpe exhibit.
The majority on this particular issue is not well organized. They do not have strong, talented leaders like the conservative minority does.
Mapplethorpe. No! More Mapplethorpe! Again.
The controversy remains the hot topic on local airwaves. There's even a song about it.
The whole country's laughing at us. Simon, I don't know if these things are obscene.
And at Cincinnati's famous chili parlors, people are talking less about baseball and more about art and the county sheriff.
We have some people here that try to run the city, that want to keep it very, 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 very conservative.
If I don't want to go look at pictures of naked people, I won't go and look at them.
As the controversy drags on, more Cincinnatians say they are embarrassed by it, and they don't see much relief in sight as the city moves ahead with its case against the art museum. Charles Thomas, ABC News, Cincinnati.
In a Boston courtroom tomorrow, a trial will begin that pits religious faith against medical science. As ABC's Joe Bergantino reports, the choice that one young couple made resulted in a family tragedy.
In 1986, they failed to seek medical care when their 2-year-old son Robin began suffering from fevers and vomiting. After 4 days, Robin died of a bowel obstruction, an ailment most doctors say could have been readily diagnosed and treated.
I don't think we were wrong. We loved our child and we tried our best to save him in the ways that we thought were best.
The ways taught by Christian Science founder Mary Baker Eddy, spiritual healing through prayer. Parents who practice it in Massachusetts are exempt from child abuse charges, but not manslaughter. Despite that, the Twitchell's attorney argues their actions were protected by law and that prosecuting them amounts to religious persecution.
This has much less to do with the Twitchells and their behavior as it does have to do with the district attorney and his moral disagreement with the Christian Science Church.
There comes a time
when the parents, although they can be martyrs for their religion, they cannot allow their child to be a martyr for their religion.
The Christian Science Church is so concerned about this trial, it has taken out full-page ads to defend spiritual healing.
It is a care system that has a well-established record of healing, and it seems to us it would be unfair to discriminate against a method of healing just because it's spiritual.
No matter what happens in the Twitchell case, the church faces another fight. The state legislature is considering outlawing the Christian Science practice of spiritual healing in cases where a child's life is in danger. Joe Bergantino, ABC News, Boston.
The concept of divine healing has been a central tenet of the Christian Science Church since its founding by Mary Baker Eddy in 1879. The trial, now underway in Boston, is only one example of serious trouble the church is facing. On the others, ABC's Morton Dean.
The domed majesty of the Mother Church in Boston and the inner calm of a typical small Christian Science reading room present a misleading impression of tranquility and financial well-being. Church historians say that membership in the church, never very big, has dwindled to fewer than 200,000 around the world.
Many churches are closing. There are fewer practitioners by the hundreds. Practitioners are like ministers in other religions, if you will.
And the Christian Science Church is being rocked by a growing internal dispute over the millions it spends on radio and TV operations. The dispute erupted in 1988. The 5-member church board of directors and media chief Jack Hoagland altered the money-losing Christian Science Monitor. More color, but fewer pages. At the same time, they plunged into a major expansion of the church's broadcast activities. The aim, to reach out and revive interest in Christian Science. But dissident members who fear they will be excommunicated for speaking out claim the big push into radio and TV goes beyond the church's mission.
We are turning away from the healing mission of Christian Science to big business, big marketing, advertising, and we've joined some dizzying race into electronic media.
That aside, many church members object to the sheer amount of money involved. A Boston television station, Channel 68, an investment of more than $50 million. It's unprofitable and is one of the least watched stations in town. Shortwave radio facilities for broadcast overseas. This year, church members were asked to contribute $37 million to pay for them. A national nightly newscast on cable. It's drenched in red ink, losing more than $20 million a year. And while the newspaper's losses aren't as great as they used to be, the Monitor still lost nearly $19 million in the year ending last April. If the current rate of losses continues, many Christian scientists worry that the church's main operating fund will run dry. To rebuild its treasury, the church has been trying to sell off some of its vast real estate holdings, including this property in Boston and the Christian Science Church near the White House. Church leaders have repeatedly refused requests by ABC News to be interviewed about this controversy. Church dissidents say their requests for information have also gone unanswered. So deep are the feelings, some dissidents have threatened to sue the church, and others believe that bankruptcy may be the only way to save it. They say then secrecy could be lifted, spending brought under control, and church leaders forced out of office. Morton Dean, ABC News, New York.
We'll have more news in just a moment. No cause for alarm about taking the pain reliever ibuprofen so long as patients read the warning label carefully. Ibuprofen is the key ingredient in such things as Advil, Motrin, Nuprin. A study published over the weekend reported that its use could produce kidney failure in some patients with otherwise mild kidney problems. The drug's manufacturer said today it has a good safety record. Our next report tonight is about a new weapon in the police arsenal, which is extremely effective. For one particular reason, it can be extremely painful. In Los Angeles over the weekend, police used nunchucks, those devices that look like 2 nightsticks tied together, at a demonstration against abortion. An earlier use of nunchucks in San Diego has prompted a $5 million lawsuit against police. Here's ABC's Brian Rooney.
It was Bruce Lee, the matinee idol of martial arts, who showed everyone what the nunchuck can do. But Kevin Orcutt, a relatively unknown policeman from Thornton, Colorado, is showing the officers of America what this odd Oriental weapon can do for them.
We can take him right on down if we have to.
When a police officer gets a grip with his nunchucks, you go where he goes. It creates leverage officers just can't get with their hands. The San Diego Police Department was among the first to use Orcutt's nunchucks to arrest anti-abortion demonstrators. It hurts a lot, which is partly why it's so effective. The Orcutt Police Nunchuck, as it's called, is 2 sticks of high-impact plastic joined at one end by heavy nylon cord. Unlike the one used by Bruce Lee, made of wood and a chain, Orcutt's tool is designed for controlling a person, not killing him.
If I could provide an officer with a way to better restrain and control someone who's resisting him violently even, it would reduce injuries actually because you wouldn't have to resort to hitting them.
The nunchucks are designed to be used in ways the old straight nightstick never could.
Down on the ground, lay flat, lay flat.
Only police departments can buy them. More than 50 of them have. And like here in Costa Mesa, California, they have to buy the training as well. Part of which is that you only swing in self-defense. But police say the nunchucks are so good, sometimes the mystique of them does the job.
Most people, watch TV and stuff, so they know what it is. And most of the time when they see it, they don't want to mess with it.
You don't want there to be really a fair fight between a criminal and a police officer. You want the officer to have the leading edge.
The nunchucks are supposed to cause pain without permanent damage, although some of the San Diego demonstrators said they hurt too much.
I tried to go limp, but the searing pain was so intense that I did walk with them.
But that's the idea. Nunchucks are now being tested by the Los Angeles police as an alternative to the painful holds police have been using. If they like it here, beat police all over America might end up swinging a strange stick. Brian Rooney, ABC News, Los Angeles.
On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained over 11 points today, and the trading was slow. In our next segment, one woman's attempt to help the refugees from the fighting in South Africa. At a London soccer stadium today, more than 72,000 people gathered to sing and dance in honor of the South African black leader Nelson Mandela and his wife. On his right, Mandela spoke to the crowd, calling for a continuation of the fight against the South African system of racial inequality. Promoters estimate that 1 billion people around the world saw today's concert on television. Renewed violence among rival black political factions in the South African province of Natal has left 11 people dead in the past 24 hours, more than 40 dead over the Easter weekend. In the midst of that violence, ABC's Don Kladstrup found a symbol of progress.
They are everywhere, along roads, in fields and vacant lots, wherever they can find refuge. Nearly 20,000 people have fled or been burned out of their homes. But now, out of this valley of death, has come some hope from a most unexpected place.
Welcome to Pietermaritzburg, a quiet, laid-back community sometimes known as Sleepy Hollow, where many whites pretty much closed their eyes to the violence surrounding them until they arrived.
You look at entire families, 3 or 4 children. Their home was burnt down yesterday. They've got their entire belongings in one carrier bag. Walk into our office of our 13-story building with tears in their eyes, ask for accommodation. What can you do?
What Danette Davis did is open her house to them, something which is illegal under the Group Areas Act, a law which prohibits blacks from living in white areas.
We're allowed to have servants. We're not allowed to have people.
Despite warnings from police, Davis provides shelter to about 50 refugees, 9 in her house, the rest in another building she owns. Creature comforts are few. There's almost no furniture, and finding enough food and clothing is a constant concern. What bothers Davis most, however, is the reaction of some white neighbors.
I've been called a communist. Why, I don't know. I'm rearing all these children here are all terrorists. They're future terrorists, and that's what I'm doing. I'm rearing terrorists, looking after the people that are going to stab me in the back. I'm human. I mean, they're human. They're little kids. They need something. They don't want to live like that. Nobody wants to live like that. I don't know, what can I say? I suppose it's just, gee, it makes me want to cry.
With the number of homeless in Natal rising, Davis realizes that what she's doing probably won't count for much in the long run. But, she says, if you can improve these lives, even for a short while, it's better than nothing. Don Kladstrup, ABC News, Peter Maritzburg.
Two other news items overseas. In northeast India, disaster on board a commuter train near the city of Patna. A cylinder of welding gas exploded. There was a fire. 100 or more people are believed to have been killed. The world's newest democracy in the making is in the Himalayan kingdom of Nepal. King Birendra lifted a ban on political parties and then asked the newly legalized opposition to form a government. It'll be the first government in 30 years not hand-picked by the king. We'll be back in a moment.
Tonight on Nightline, a national epidemic of cheating in colleges. Some surprising examples and some solutions tonight.
On the front pages of many city newspapers today, there were giant pictures of the actress Greta Garbo. She would not have approved of the publicity. Miss Garbo was 84 when she died in a New York City hospital yesterday. As befits her passion for privacy, we have not yet been told what caused her death. This legend, for she was that, made only about 24 movies, and none for the last 49 years. It has been said that no one could suffer on camera like Greta Garbo, and no one could electrify the screen with deeper emotions.
And even this.
She often played the irresistible woman, and more often than not, her character came to a tragic end.
I must give you up.
As a young girl, she worked lathering men's faces in a barber shop and had modeled hats for a department store when she was discovered in her native Sweden by director Moritz Stiller. Struck by her extraordinary natural beauty, Stiller changed her name from Greta Gustafsson to Garbo and cast her in her first film role in 1924. Seeing her on film, he said, "You only get a face like that in front of a camera once in a century." It wasn't long before that face went off to Hollywood and stardom on the silent screen. When sound came to the movies, the publicity slogan for her first movie was "Garbo Talks." Her voice was as memorable as her face.
Give me a whiskey, ginger ale on the side. And don't be stingy, baby.
Those words became legend, and the husky voice Garbo became, in the opinion of many, Hollywood's biggest star. In 19 years, she made 24 films. She never received an Oscar for Best Actress, but in 1955, she won a Special Academy Award for a series of luminous and unforgettable performances.
That's what it comes to at last.
Garbo wasn't there to accept, having become even more famous for not being seen.
I want to be alone.
She retired from the movies at the age of only 36 and shunned the public for the rest of her days. "I've always wanted 2 lives," she once told a friend, "one for the movies and one for myself." Greta Garbo. That's our report on World News Tonight. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News, where more Americans get their news than from any other source.
It's the hot new series.
Something stinks about this case. What they're trying to do is cover up.
Don, you're off. Why? For deception. You concealed your identity and impersonated somebody else.
Capital News. After China Beach, they start at 9, 8 Central tonight.
Thanks for joining us. Good evening.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. In the Soviet Union today, Mr. Gorbachev turned up the heat on Lithuanians who want independence by threatening to turn the heat off. In a telegram to the Lithuanian parliament, Mr. Gorbachev warned that unless the Lithuanian political leadership does what he wants, the supply of natural gas to Lithuanian homes will be sharply reduced. 4 out of every 5 Lithuanian homes use natural gas piped in from elsewhere in the Soviet Union. It is a potent weapon. To remind you, the foreign press is barred from Lithuania, and so we begin in Moscow. Here's ABC's Jim Laurie.
The telegram from the Soviet gas company was the center of discussion in Lithuania's parliament today
While the telegram threatened to sharply curtail natural gas shipments to Lithuania, an official in Moscow said no reductions had actually been carried out and final orders had not been received. If the move is carried out, it could have a demoralizing and crippling effect. Some electric power plants are gas-fueled, and 80% of Lithuanians rely on gas for cooking and heating. Still, Lithuanians put on a brave face.
Of course, it would be hardship, but, well, our people have preserved the stoves for kerosene, for wood, and they'll survive it, if that is the price to pay for liberty.
People also lined up again today for gasoline. Lithuanian radio reports tonight the oil supplies to the local refinery will be cut off tomorrow morning. While Lithuania awaited the start of economic war, it got some support today in Moscow, as about 10,000 people protesting high government corruption took up the cause of Lithuania too. Freedom and sovereignty, they chanted. Lithuania's parliament continued to push freedom and sovereignty too, but now with a bit more caution. Some suggested a moratorium on passing any new laws that might anger Moscow. They still hope with time a compromise might be found to head off the embargo. Jim Laurie, ABC News, Moscow.
In Washington today, President Bush said publicly for the first time that he was considering taking measures against the Soviets if Moscow carries out its threat to cut off gas supplies to Lithuania. But his words did not carry the full weight of a warning. Here's our White House correspondent, Britt Hume.
The president interrupted a photo opportunity with the president of Honduras, whose visit has been overshadowed by the Lithuania crisis, to comment on Moscow's newest threat. But his statement was so carefully worded that he generally avoided calling the Soviet action a threat.
We are waiting to see if these Soviet announcements are implemented. Clearly, those announcements are contrary to the approach that we have urged and that others have urged upon the Soviet Union. We are considering appropriate responses if these threats are implemented.
He would not say what those responses might be, though senior officials say the options are all non-military and do not include providing natural gas to Lithuania in the event of a cutoff. This afternoon, the president met Democratic senators just back from Moscow. As the atmosphere suggests, the president is under no pressure yet from his opposition for a tougher stand on Lithuania. Senate Majority Leader Mitchell, for example, said he and his colleagues had recommended some ways the U.S. could punish the Soviets, but canceling the summit was not one of them. To the contrary, Mitchell was carrying this message from Gorbachev.
Well, I told him that Mr. Gorbachev had indicated, had asked me to express to President Bush his best wishes and that he looked forward to seeing him at the summit.
It is a summit that both sides want, and neither side wants to see aborted by the Lithuania crisis. The U.S. has long supported independence for the Baltic states, but nobody thought that would be an issue this soon, certainly not when everything else about U.S.-Soviet relations was getting better. Britt Hume, ABC News, the White House.
A sharper reaction from Europe. Officials of the Nordic Council, representing Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Iceland, have canceled a planned visit to the Soviet Union next month because they were refused permission to visit Lithuania. One council member said it's a shame that the Soviets are subjecting Lithuania to such a hard ride. In a moment, the possibility of a genetic link as a factor in alcoholism. And later in the broadcast on the American agenda, things that can be done now to save the future of the environment. And why Oakland doesn't want the Raiders.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings, brought to you by Western Union.
Each year, millions of people send money with Western Union, and for good reason. We not only invented the business of sending money, we've been perfecting it ever since. So when you send money with us, you can be sure it will get there, usually in 15 minutes or less. Of course, you could try using someone else. You could also go clam digging in a minefield. Western Union. Why even consider anyone else?
This is Lisa. Lisa loves fried food, but not all the calories. Well, Lisa, meet Pam. Pam can save you up to 500 calories a week.
Lots of traffic on your carpet? Well, it doesn't need to show it. Woolite Deep Cleaning Carpet Cleaner. It's specially formulated to get out tough, ground-in dirt. No fooling. Woolite. It's serious cleaning.
In medical news today, an important discovery about alcoholism. Researchers say today that for the first time, they have discovered a gene that appears linked to alcoholism. It is the third leading cause of death in this country after heart disease and cancer. And now it appears that in some people, at least, a tendency to develop alcoholism may be inherited. Here's Tim Johnson.
Using cadaver brain specimens, researchers from UCLA and the University of Texas at San Antonio looked for 9 genetic differences between alcoholics and non-alcoholics. In 8 of the attempts, they struck out. But in the 9th, they found something interesting. A higher proportion of the alcoholic brains had a gene that allows dopamine to attach to brain cells. Dopamine is a chemical in the brain known to be associated with addiction. The researchers found this gene present in 77% of the brain samples from alcoholics and found it missing in 72% of the samples from non-alcoholics.
There is a chemical difference in the brains of alcoholics which may contribute to their development of the disease.
However, other experts were quick to stress the lack of 100% correlation with this particular gene.
No single gene, in the opinion of most people, is likely to be the answer to alcoholism. Most people believe that there are at least several genes, and maybe many, which have different roles in different families which control the risk for being alcoholic.
Clearly, genetics may play a strong role in some families.
But for most drinkers, it's likely to be a much more balanced mix of both genetic and environmental influences.
If more precise genetic testing becomes available, it may be possible to tell people just how great their risk is for alcoholism. But for now, the message is still this, that anyone who drinks is potentially at risk for becoming a problem drinker. Dr. Timothy Johnson, ABC News.
Suppose there was a diet which could add years to your life and greatly reduce your chances of getting a variety of illnesses from heart disease to cancer. Scientists at the National Institute on Aging now say that such a diet already exists, at least for laboratory animals. As ABC's Bill Greenwood reports, the secret appears to be not in what they eat, but how much.
The average laboratory mouse lives 3 years, but these mice are not average. They're on a special diet with only 60% of the calories in a normal diet, supplemented by vitamins and nutrients. The experimental diet has added 19 months to the mouse's lifespan, even when the food is primarily fat or carbohydrates. Scientists say the diet could theoretically have the same effect on human longevity.
I think spectacular is a reasonable word to describe the results.
This is a very valuable tool for us to use to understand basic mechanisms of aging.
To duplicate the low-calorie diet, an average man could not exceed 1,500 calories. That's 4 chocolate milkshakes. A woman could not exceed 1,260 calories. That's 4 cups of ice cream. But nutritionists say they don't know why the diet works in mice, so humans should not try it. Researchers say human testing is years away. But if the future experiments show the diet for mice has the same effect on people, it could add an extra 60 years of life. Bill Greenwood, ABC News, Washington.
A new study today confirms what AIDS researchers have feared. The AIDS virus may be spreading among teenagers more rapidly than previously thought. Tests of more than 1 million teenagers applying to join the military found that about 1 in 3,000 tested positive for the AIDS virus. Another attempt by federal prosecutors today to get at the lifeblood of drug traffickers, their money. The government has ordered 173 banks in 22 states and the District of Columbia to turn over records on accounts containing as much as $400 million. The money is thought to belong to drug dealers associated with the Colombian drug cartels. The Supreme Court has ruled on an important case involving freedom of religion. The question, where to draw the line between one's religious teachings and what the law requires. The court today came down on the side of the law. Here's our law correspondent, Tim O'Brien.
The sacramental use of peyote, a hallucinogenic drug, has been central to the religious practices of many Native Americans for hundreds of years, and it still is today.
For Native people, it's a way to worship, communicate,
to pray, to be in communication with the Great Spirit.
But for Alfred Smith, it was also a quick route to the unemployment line. The state of Oregon fired him from his job as a drug counselor for using peyote, and viewing drug use as more a sin than a sacrament, denied him unemployment benefits. Today, in a sweeping ruling, the Supreme Court rejected Smith's claim that his freedom of religion had been violated. Justice Antonin Scalia, for a 5-judge majority, wrote that whenever a religious practice conflicts with the criminal laws that affect everyone, the First Amendment does not apply. The criminal law prevails. Justices Blackmun, Brennan, and Marshall dissented angrily, accusing the majority of treating religious freedom as a luxury rather than an essential element of liberty. Justice O'Connor, who agreed that Smith could be denied unemployment benefits, said the majority had gone too far, that today's ruling is incompatible with our nation's fundamental commitment to individual religious liberty. The court conceded that today's ruling may put some minority religions at a disadvantage, but said that would still be preferable to a system where an individual's religious beliefs could become, in the words of Justice Scalia, a law unto itself. Tim O'Brien, ABC News at the Supreme Court.
One of the men who was central to the modern civil rights crusade in America has died. The Reverend Ralph Abernathy was perhaps the closest friend and associate of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., helping him to organize the bus boycott in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955. At one point, Abernathy says we were known as the Civil Rights Twins. Abernathy was with Dr. King in Memphis when he was assassinated in 1968 and succeeded him as head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. He was bothered sometimes by finding himself in Dr. King's shadow. Once, when visiting a school, he said, "Not a single student knew who I was." Reverend Abernathy died today in an Atlanta hospital. He had suffered a long illness, and he was 64. We'll be back. Sobering news about inflation today. After 2 months of increases caused in part by the weather, many economists had expected that inflation would level off. It has not. Consumer prices rose 0.5% last month. As ABC's Stephen Ogg reports, a third of that was in the cost of clothing.
Remember all the sales at the department stores last Christmas? That was during the turmoil in the retail business, when several big store chains were slashing prices to bring in customers so they could stay in business. Now, store owners are trying to make it all back by raising prices. So far this year, clothing prices are up more than 21% at an annual rate. But some analysts say competition won't let that continue.
The longer term, there's not going to be a trend towards more inflation in apparel. There are just too many stores out there in the country looking to get every consumer's last dollar that they can.
Housing was another reason consumer prices rose during March. Both the cost of owning a home and the price of renting one were up. This at the same time fewer new homes are being built. The government says housing starts fell more than 9% last month, and building permits were down 8%.
We expect this to be the low point of the year in March, and that we'll see the market come back.
Today's report on consumer prices is a warning. Unless inflation slows down, interest rates may not drop as much as expected, and that's not a good sign for the economy. Stephen Ogg, ABC News, Washington.
On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained more than 2 points, and the trading was slow. 6 years after the United States pulled out of and stopped paying dues to the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, the State Department said today that UNESCO is still mismanaged and biased against Israel. The U.S., it said, will not rejoin. In Paris, UNESCO's Director General said he regrets the U.S. action and that changes have been made. 2 Canadian Air Force jets collided in midair today over the West German city of Karlsruhe near the French frontier. One pilot landed in his ejection seat on a highway and was seriously hurt. The other pilot was killed. The latest round in the war of the airwaves. Cuba today began jamming Radio Marti. That is the Voice of America station, which has been transmitting news and propaganda to Cuba for the past 5 years. The Cubans started jamming TV Marti when it went on the air 3 weeks ago. In a moment, the American agenda, a way of living to save the earth. Tonight, as we get closer to Earth Day, the environment is on the American agenda again. In Washington today, President Bush got a polite but a cool reception at an international conference on global warming, which the White House had called. The reason is this: many American environmentalists, joined today by West Germany and the Dutch, are suspicious of the president's commitment to doing something about global warming. They have said quite openly that he would rather talk about it. Our report on the agenda tonight is about people preparing for a future they fear. Here's Ned Potter.
The time is the near future, and the environmental crisis is closing in on the world's food supply. Grain riots in Africa, climate change and air pollution wiping out crops. The global economy totters as nations fight over what's left. Some environmental groups say all this is actually possible.
We're still losing forests, we're still losing soil, we're still increasing population at a record rate. Nothing is headed in the right direction at the moment.
But even the darkest doomsayers believe a crisis need never happen. They say the solution is to make society sustainable. That means shifting to ways of living that do not use up the Earth's resources. Environmentalists picture us eventually farming our food more wisely, wasting less energy, designing our homes better. And in fact, working examples of what the future could be already exist. Near Taos, New Mexico, Sam Bascom and Miel Christensen have built their own homes for a fraction of what it usually costs to build and heat them.
Last year I lived in a house and we paid $200 a month for utility bills. This year we pay nothing and it's a lot warmer.
The reason is that the walls are made from trash, old tires packed in soil, which makes terrific insulation. Architect Michael Reynolds has built dozens of these homes. He says with no other heat but sunlight, the finished homes naturally stay at 70 degrees year-round because those heavy walls protect you both from sub-zero cold and desert heat.
We have 3-foot walls around every room, but that is not near as ridiculous as burning coal, giving us acid rain, and shooting energy through wires and heating up empty spaces that just lose it.
Well-insulated housing is only one ingredient. What goes inside has to be efficient as well. At the Rocky Mountain Institute in Colorado, environmental researchers are testing dozens of ways to save energy. The refrigerator draws 1/10 as much power as usual because it has extra thick walls. The shower uses compressed air to give you an invigorating wash with 1/8 as much water. The toilet is designed to use 1/4 as much. And most important, the lights cut your electric bill to 1/4 because the bulbs are compact fluorescents. Total electric bill for a house like this, $5 a month.
And very few of these require any change in your standard of living. They look and act and feel just like the equipment that you're used to. They just don't cost you as much money to run.
But energy savings and better housing are not enough if we keep farming the land with chemicals that wear it out. Growing food for the future is an ongoing experiment in Falmouth, Massachusetts.
We don't use any kinds of pesticides.
This dome holds a complete ecosystem. Plants grow year-round, even in the harsh climate of New England, heated only by the sun. Vegetables are naturally protected by insects that prey on pests. Fish are raised in tanks, and the bonus is their waste is used for fertilizer. Actually, very little we've shown you is terribly high-tech or even very expensive. But none of these projects alone is enough to create a future that works. If you combine them, energy, housing, food, the future begins to emerge. Your home could use the sun or wind for power, and with super insulation like tires, you may never get a heating bill. Your food supply, fish as well as vegetables, could come from outlying greenhouses, close to your home to reduce transport costs. The idea is that such a community could sustain itself, that is, provide food and shelter without polluting and endangering the planet.
We will then have the satisfaction of knowing that we're living in a world that's not threatening the future of our children and grandchildren.
We have already started. Environmentalists say that with a little bit of vision, we could make visions of crisis part of the past. Ned Potter, ABC News, Taos, New Mexico.
This weekend, the country will be marking the 20th anniversary of Earth Day. Tomorrow on the American agenda, we will see how America's endangered plants and species have fared in those 20 years. And we'll have our final report in just a moment.
Now, she was called Supreme Commander of the Chinese student movement crushed in Tiananmen Square. For months, she's been in hiding. Her first U.S. TV interview tonight.
Finally here this evening, we agree it's a little early for football, but the Los Angeles Raiders have forced their way back into the news. You'll notice we said the Los Angeles Raiders, not the Oakland Raiders. The news is Oakland doesn't want them back. Here's Ken Kashiwahara.
Only 5 weeks ago, the city and the county announced it was a done deal. Fans were happy. The team's owner, Al Davis, was happy. After all, this is where the world champion Raiders brought pride to a city that has always been a poor stepchild of its San Francisco neighbor. But now, Mayor Lionel Wilson says the done deal has become undone.
Well, it sounds like if it isn't dead, it's dying.
So what happened? At first, the city guaranteed the Raiders more than $400 million in fees and ticket sales, and fans responded with their memories and their money, putting down deposits on 37,000 tickets. But then, to the surprise of the city fathers, Oakland became a house divided over spending priorities. Opponents objected to the city's risking money on a football team instead of spending it on the homeless, on the battle against crime, on a bankrupt school system.
Spend millions of dollars for them for a football team when they have kids who need to be taught education. It's a lousy system.
33,000 residents signed petitions opposing the deal, enough to put it on the ballot, and enough political pressure on the mayor for him to call off the deal. Today, the Raiders weren't talking, but radio listeners were.
I tell you what, I think that we're all victim of Al Davis's greed, if I might say that.
Tonight, Oakland's mayor says he will ask the city council to rescind its deal with the Raiders. And while negotiations could start all over again, for now, the Los Angeles Raiders is the reality. Oakland remains a memory. Ken Kashiwahara, ABC News.
And that is our report on World News Tonight. We'll see you here again tomorrow. I'm Peter Jennings. Good night.
This has been World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
This has been a presentation of ABC News, where more Americans get their news than from any other source.
Tuesday.
I am going to be thrown out like an old refrigerator.
When an old boyfriend returns,
Oh, God.
Hayden goes undercover.
You are insane.
I am just protecting my turf.
I always get goosebumps when you call me turf.
An all-new coach after Roseanne.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin by reminding you tonight just how many times in the past the United States as a nation and Americans as individuals have had their emotions tied in knots by those people in the Middle East holding Americans hostage. Today in Beirut, one of those groups believed to be holding 3 Americans has said that one of them will be let go within the next 48 hours. The 3 Americans being held by the Islamic Jihad for the Liberation of Palestine are all professors at the International College in Beirut, Robert Polhill, Alan Steen, and Jesse Turner. They have been without their freedom for 1,180 days. Here's ABC's Bill Rediker.
Accompanied by a photograph of 42-year-old Jesse Turner, the statement delivered to a Western news agency in Beirut promised to release one of the 3 American hostages, but it did not name which one would be released. The 3 professors were abducted from the campus of Beirut University College in January 1987 by terrorists posing as Lebanese police. In the statement, Islamic Jihad said it was responding to appeals from Iran and called the action a humanitarian move. But sources in Tehran say that Iranian President Hashemi Rafsanjani is brokering the release to improve relations with the West and the United States in particular. Rafsanjani hopes Washington will return billions of dollars in Iranian assets frozen by the U.S. for more than a decade. Iran's economy is suffering desperately, even though the vastly expensive 8-year war with its neighbor Iraq is over. Rafsanjani has been battling Iranian radicals who had successfully opposed his efforts to help free Western hostages in Lebanon, including the 8 Americans held there. Tonight, diplomats in the Middle East say that if this is not another false alarm, it could mean that President Rafsanjani is prevailing in Iran's power struggle, which could have a decisive impact on the fate of other hostages.
Bill Redeker, ABC News, London.
But as always, there is the risk here that we are headed down that familiar and frustrating road again. The Bush administration is understandably cautious. ABC's John McWethy is at the State Department.
U.S. government sources say the Bush administration is taking this hostage report very seriously. But because there have been so many false alarms in the past, caution is the word of the day.
I don't want to say anything that might adversely affect any chances that there are for the release of any hostages.
Secretary Baker said Assistant Secretary of State John Kelly, who was named in the kidnapper's note, was not going to travel to Syria as requested by the Islamic Jihad.
Assistant Secretary Kelly is in Europe, and at the present time, the Middle East is not on his agenda.
But a possible hostage release is being taken seriously enough for the Pentagon to order an American medical evacuation plane to be put on alert in Europe, ready to fly to the Middle East on short notice. Despite all this, U.S. officials say they really don't know if anyone is going to be released. Several hostage families have been contacted by the State Department and warned not to get their hopes up too high. John McWethy, ABC News, the State Department.
It was another of those ugly days in Beirut. A school bus full of children was hit by a grenade. As it crossed into Christian East Beirut from the south, the gas tank exploded. 15 people died, 11 were children. A few hours earlier, 3 soldiers were killed in an explosion at the headquarters of the dissident Christian military leader, General Michel Aoun. In a moment, some of the day's other news. The Supreme Court, citing the need to protect children, upholds a very tough child pornography law. And later in the broadcast, where the Earth stands 20 years after the first Earth Day. And finally, why watch the world when you can watch Waddington?
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by today's Chevrolet.
The time has come for a new kind of full-size luxury. The 1991 Chevrolet Caprice. From its proven V8 power and rear-wheel drive to its quiet cushioned ride and solid steel frame, we wanted you to see how beautiful the new Caprice is underneath, because you might forget after seeing what comes on top. The time has come for the new Chevrolet Caprice. Prepare to be impressed.
Good friends and good food, but my stomach aches. My party, and my Lanta too.
Phone calls, deadlines, stomach complaints, my job, and my Lanta too.
Circles and turns while my stomach burns. My trip, my Lanta 2.
Double strength My Lanta 2 with nearly double the acid neutralizing power of any leading regular strength brand. The strength it takes to get on with your life.
And my life takes My Lanta 2.
Overseas, the political leadership in the Soviet Union appears to have made good on its threat to Lithuania. Yesterday, Moscow said that oil supplies to Lithuania would be cut off unless the Lithuanians repealed some of the laws they have passed since their unilateral declaration of independence. Tonight, the oil apparently stopped flowing. Here's ABC's Jim Laurie.
Soviet troops stationed in Lithuania entered the war of nerves today. They were deployed for a short time near an oil pumping station. And reports late tonight said that Moscow had shut down oil supplies going into Lithuania's main oil refinery. But some suggest Moscow is reluctant to cut off all oil because that would harm other parts of the Soviet Union as well. The oil and gas facilities here also service the other Baltic states, Belarusia, and the key Soviet port of Kaliningrad. Meanwhile, the Lithuanian Prime Minister, Kazimiera Prunskiene, went to Norway to negotiate possible oil deliveries. In a Moscow stopover, she said it was Norway's idea. And government advisor Algis Chikolis led a delegation to Moscow to explore the possibility of talks. He came away confused about Moscow's position.
The signals from Moscow are quite eerie, and one cannot tell who is doing what and what for.
But hoping to encourage talks, the Lithuanian parliament tonight voted not to pass any new laws until May 1st. Lithuanians feel by slowing down their pace of independent lawmaking, they've offered a concession. The next move they feel is up to Mikhail Gorbachev. Jim Laurie, ABC News, Moscow.
Just before we talk to our White House correspondent, Britt Hume, about what the president thinks of this, an historical note. In the 13th century, Lithuania was a powerful independent state. In this century, Lithuanians have had only 2 decades of independence between the 2 world wars. In 1940, Lithuania was forcibly incorporated into the Soviet Union. Mr. Gorbachev insists that under the Soviet constitution, no republic can succeed without first holding a referendum. And so far, the Lithuanians have refused. And now at the White House, ABC's Britt Hume. Britt, I assume the president has heard about this. What, if anything, is he going to do about it?
Well, the president has heard about it, Peter, but the last word I had from the Bush High Command this afternoon, and it was just a short time ago, was that there will be nothing further from here tonight on this subject, and officials said they are still getting conflicting reports and have not yet confirmed that indeed the oil cutoff has occurred.
Britt, in recent days, the president has appeared cautious, some would even say reluctant, to go after Mr. Gorbachev for what he is doing to Lithuania. Fair comment?
I think so, Peter. The president has a summit coming up in about 6 weeks with Mikhail Gorbachev. He wants to make the most of that, the most of the improving relationship with the Soviet Union, not only for the sake of the United States, but all the Western allies, not one of whom has urged a tougher course toward the Soviets on Lithuania than Mr. Bush has taken. And he wants to make the least of this controversy because it really stands in the way of all that.
Does that mean in that White House behind you, Britt, that independence for Lithuania is not very high on the agenda?
Independence for Lithuania is something that the United States has stood for on the record for 50 years, but I think that standing next to all the other issues ranging from disarmament to the unification of Germany, while it's not something the administration can say publicly, it is not all that great a priority.
Okay, Britt Hume, thanks very much at the White House. In other news today, the Supreme Court has upheld one of the toughest child pornography laws in the nation. The court has ruled that the mere possession of a sexually explicit material depicting children can be made a crime, even in the privacy of one's home. Here's our law correspondent, Tim O'Brien.
Armed with a search warrant, police went to this house in Columbus, Ohio, where they found 4 photos, each of a nude male teenager in a sexually explicit pose. Clyde Osborne, who lived there, was arrested and convicted for violating Ohio's child pornography law. The law prohibits the possession and lewd exhibition of any material that shows a minor who is not the person's child in a state of nudity. The law has a number of exceptions when the material is for scientific, artistic, or educational purposes. But Osborne, who had the photos at home for his own personal use, didn't qualify for any of those exceptions. His case raised the novel question of whether mere possession of sexually explicit material that is not legally obscene can be made a crime just because it involves children. The High Court today said yes, rejecting arguments the Ohio law violated any right to privacy. Children are different, said Justice Byron White, and the state has a compelling interest in protecting them and in destroying the market for their exploitation. 3 justices dissented, led by William Brennan, who complained the court is unable to even hazard a guess as to what a lewd exhibition might mean, that the Ohio law might be triggered by any photograph of a partially nude child. Brennan specifically suggested that even this familiar ad for suntan lotion might be illegal in Ohio. The court reaffirmed that simple possession of obscene material involving adults cannot be made a crime, but in doing so gave the states broad latitude to prevent children from becoming victims of pornographers. Tim O'Brien, ABC News, Washington.
The High Court also ruled today that a judge in Kansas City went too far when he ordered an increase in property taxes to pay for a school desegregation plan. The court said it would have been all right to tell school officials to come up with the money. It was imposing the taxes himself that was not legal. In a courtroom in Atlanta tomorrow, the question will be, does a person have the right to wear a mask in public? Not a Halloween mask or a holiday costume, but the hood and robes of the Ku Klux Klan. In Atlanta, ABC's Al Dale.
The Ku Klux Klan has always relied on costumes and secrecy. Hiding behind masks, Klansmen struck fear into minority groups, terrorizing them with cross burnings, beatings, and lynchings. One of the ways states, including Georgia, have tried to limit Klan activity is with laws making it illegal to wear masks on public property. Such laws have hurt Klan recruitment, since many members wanted to keep their identities secret. Last February, Klansman Shade Miller challenged Georgia's law by appearing on a suburban Atlanta street in full Klan regalia. He was arrested and faces a $1,000 fine. Klansmen say wearing the mask is a form of free speech protected by the Constitution. and that anonymity protects them.
We have the right to do it, and our people have the right to protect their jobs and their families from repercussions from violent organizations.
But the man who will prosecute the case says given the Klan's history of terror, wearing the mask is a threatening act.
It's the anonymity that conveys the message, and the message that it conveys is one of intimidation, and we don't feel you have a right to do that.
Ironically, the Klan points to a case where a federal court allowed the NAACP to keep its membership rolls secret as protection against government harassment. The NAACP, though, says that comparison doesn't hold up.
We simply do not believe that the First Amendment reaches as far as to allow individuals bent on violent, terroristic activities to do so under the cover of a mask.
What happens in this courthouse tomorrow could affect laws in at least 16 states, and most likely will be appealed. The U.S. Supreme Court may end up deciding whether wearing the Klan mask is a form of protected free speech or a sinister message of fear and intimidation. Al Dale, ABC News, Lawrenceville, Georgia.
We'll have more news in just a moment.
What do professionals do when they get a clogged sink, a stopped-up shower, a backed-up tub? They just pour in the power. The professional power of professional strength liquid Drano with 3 active ingredients. The power it takes to clear really tough clogs. Professionals use the professional liquid, and now you can too. Pour in the power. New professional strength liquid Drano.
The Volvo 240 does a fine job of surviving accidents. But the Subaru Legacy with 4-wheel drive and anti-lock brakes reminds you the best way to survive an accident is not to get into one.
My headaches are full-grown, adult-sized bangaroos, so I bang them back with Bayer. It's strong. It's not an aspirin substitute. It's made for adults, just like you and me.
For adult-sized pain, Bayer, the wonder drug that works wonders.
Do yourself proud, make you look beautiful, do it for yourself with Minwax and Wood.
Get beautiful color with Minwax Wood Finish and lasting protection with Minwax Polyurethane.
So do yourself proud with Minwax and Wood.
Kmart rolls out fun for the whole family with Huffy all-terrain bikes. The quality you need at the price you want. Your choice, $99.
There was a big improvement in the trade deficit in February, but it may not last. The deficit dropped nearly $3 billion to $6.5 billion. The main reason was a sharp decline in oil imports because of that spell of warm weather in January. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average lost nearly 33 points today. The trading was moderate. More bad news for the Army's helicopter program. The Apache was designed to carry anti-tank missiles to knock out Soviet tanks in Europe. With a lot less tension there, the Defense Secretary Dick Cheney has already canceled plans to buy 168 Apaches next year. But tomorrow, the General Accounting Office will tell Congress that the Army should stop buying any new Apaches because they are seriously flawed. Here's ABC's Bob Zelnick.
McDonnell Douglas made this film to promote its new Apache helicopter.
Apache is a true total system for battle, ready to fight 24 hours a day.
Not quite. The new GAO study concludes that enormous maintenance problems have plagued the Apache. Rotor blades have broken down almost 10 times more often than the Army expected. 30-millimeter cannons repeatedly failed to work. Hydraulic systems frequently malfunctioned. As a result, the Apache has been fully operational only about 50% of the time. The Army standard is 70%. What's more, during recent operations in Panama, the Army could not use the Apache to support U.S. troops in close combat with the enemy. The reason? Apache's weapons are so destructive they could have endangered U.S. forces. The GAO recommends the Army cancel plans to buy 132 more of the helicopters this year. That would save nearly $1.5 billion already approved by Congress. Despite embarrassment over Apache's performance, the Army says it intends to buy the remaining aircraft. And with no other attack helicopters being produced, Congress is not expected to block the purchase. Bob Zelnick, ABC News at the Pentagon.
When we come back, the American agenda. Earth Day, 20 years later. What has happened to the world?
Flight 2105.
Every evening, we pack over 700,000 passengers onto our planes. No drinks are served, no meals are prepared, yet our customers love our service, like our UPS Next Day Air Letter. Guaranteed overnight delivery to any address coast to coast, and at just $9, far less than other companies charge.
Set takeoff thrust.
No one seems to mind that there's no in-flight movie.
There you are, going along, feeling on top of the world. Then out of the blue, constipation. You feel bloated, twisted. You just can't go on. And fiber, it's so slow. You want fast medicine. X-Lax, it's the right medicine. Medical experts agree. X-Lax gives your system back the natural fluids it needs to put you back on top of the world again. In hours, not days. Today's X-Lax, the right medicine.
In the morning, in the evening, ain't we got fun? You know, a Carnival cruise is more fun than anything. We have 8 fun ships, and we go to all the fun places. The Caribbean, Bahamas, Mexico. So for your next vacation, remember, sunny weather, all together, we've got the fun.
Take a 3-, 4-, or 7-day vacation on Carnival, the most popular cruise line in the world.
The new mouth, a healthy, cleaner, smarter mouth. A new improved Close-Up mouth.
The fluoride toothpaste with the protection of real mouth rinse. A toothpaste and mouth rinse in one.
For a new mouth, healthy mouth. A new Close-Up mouth.
Tonight on the American agenda, when the backyard becomes the world. In the 20 years between the first Earth Day and Earth Day this Sunday, that is the biggest change in perceptions about the environment. In 1970, people worried about a single dam or that smokestack they could see from the back porch. Today, there's a growing realization that the whole world is at risk. On the subject of extinction, here's ABC's Barry Serafin.
In the conflict between man and plants and animals are still losing. A for sale sign on a patch of desert outside of Tucson, Arizona means development is on the way and animals are on their way out. Throughout much of the Southwest, the desert tortoise was recently added to the federal government's list of threatened species, but it is not yet protected here in the Sonoran Desert. So when developers move in, so does Candy Grunwald. With state permission, she relocates the tortoises, placing them in homes and museums, saving their lives, but ending their days in the wild.
Scientists consider these populations biologically dead. They know that this is slated for development, and they can't really do anything about it.
Such conflicts are not limited to the desert or even the U.S. mainland. An urgent struggle for survival is underway in Hawaii.
About 27% of all of the rare and endangered birds and plants in the United States are found in Hawaii.
Half of Hawaii's 140 unique bird species have already vanished, and 1/3 of those that remain are endangered because of development and the introduction of non-native plants and animals. Sugarcane production, for example, has pushed the nene, the state bird, from much of its habitat. Only 300 are left in the wild. The banana poca vine, brought from South America for its edible fruit, has already swallowed up more than 70,000 acres of Hawaiian rainforest, threatening dozens of native species, including plants which have shown the potential for fighting molds and even cancer.
Each one of these species represent really a lot of important information for mankind. To lose a place like this forest here at Waikimoi would be like throwing a whole library of books out without ever reading them.
There is some good news. In its 17 years, the Endangered Species Act has produced some success stories. Banning the use of DDT, for example, has helped to more than quadruple the number of bald eagles and spurred the recovery of peregrine falcons, ospreys, and other species. A few red wolves have been carefully reintroduced into the wild. Other endangered populations are kept alive, but only in captivity. About 30 condors, for example, and 125 black-footed ferrets. There are now nearly 1,100 species on the threatened and endangered list, but more than 3,000 might also qualify. The government adds only 50 to 60 species for protection and recovery plans each year. Limited manpower and budgets are part of the reason Critics also blame a lack of political will.
These decisions involving the Endangered Species Act often have great ramifications politically and economically and socially.
Adding a name involves hard choices. From the snail darter, the small fish that temporarily blocked construction of a dam in the 70s, to the possible listing this summer of the spotted owl, which could mean the loss of logging jobs in the Pacific Northwest. There is widespread agreement that we need more research, more information on which to base the hard choices. Many now believe we need new approaches, marking whole groups of species and whole habitats for survival. There are growing warnings that we cannot avoid or put off the difficult choices. One of the most alarming and mysterious warnings is the disappearance here and around the world of hundreds of thousands of populations of frogs. No one is sure why they are vanishing, but scientists suspect habitat loss, acid rain, and water pollution. Scientists say the frog deaths are a chilling symptom of something gone wrong in our global environment.
We are going to see more extinctions in our lifetime than have occurred on Earth since man appeared on Earth.
The frogs, Wake says, are like the proverbial canary in a coal mine, warning miners when the air turns poisonous. But
when the canary died, the coal miner left the mine. Where do we have to go?
At worst, allowing species to disappear could, like pulling threads from a tapestry, one day endanger us. At best, it would leave our world a poorer and lonelier place. Barry Seraphin, ABC News, Tucson, Arizona.
Schools are beginning to reinforce a child's natural love of nature. There's a lesson in that for all of us on tomorrow's agenda.
I hit a tree head-on, going 45 miles an hour. My earrings flew out of my ears. My shoes flew off my feet. I totaled my LeBaron, but I walked away with a few bruises. You know, people say I was lucky. I say luck had nothing to do with it. A Chrysler airbag saved my life.
I could give you a dozen reasons why you should consider a Chrysler product, but today, I'll give you just one. Karen McGowan.
Just this much Cortaid helps heal more kinds of itches and rashes than all of these. Because Cortaid has a clinically proven healing medicine they don't have. That's why Cortaid is the Itch Aid.
Sears has a great new line of Craftsman garage door openers.
Like this new half-horsepower Craftsman for only $159.96. It comes with 2 triple-function transmitters, but a deal this good won't last long.
So see you at Sears.
At Enterprise Rent-A-Car, we don't just care about the distance our cars go, but the distance our people go. Call us.
Great.
We'll come pick you up.
That's 200 Rogers Road.
Enterprise. We go the extra distance.
At Western Union, we not only invented the business of sending money, we've been perfecting it ever since. Still, you could try using someone else. You could also go clam digging in a minefield. Western Union. Why even consider anyone else?
Tonight on Nightline with Ted Koppel. Frazzled nerves and an ominous sense of the future. New tremors shake the San Francisco area as citizens mark 2 tragic anniversaries. Tonight.
Finally this evening, Dateline Waddington in the English county of Lancashire, where they too are having their 15 minutes of fame. The villagers of Waddington got their chance when the village was chosen to be part of an experiment in British television. Here's ABC's John Donovan.
The villagers of Waddington thought they knew all there was to know about the butcher's wife. After all, they had known Barbara Harrison all their lives. But they never guessed the butcher's wife could do television.
Just eat it. Just eat it. Me again.
Barbara and her Auntie Annie naturally stick to meat dishes. No one says it's great television,
You might not like it.
but in Waddington, she's a star. In fact, since they turned the Sunday school into a TV studio, almost everyone's a star in Waddington. Debbie, the legal secretary.
Debbie, you sit in there.
And James comes back.
Michelle, the housewife. And Jonathan, the salesman.
Good evening and welcome.
Hosting together the nightly show they call WVTV. Waddington Village Television. Television about themselves. And this in a village of 1,000 people, whose only prior experience with TV was limited to watching the same 4 channels everyone else gets in Britain. Until last month. That's when a big British TV company parked out back of the Upper Buck pub, and by cable began feeding homes in the village 32 channels of TV from around the world, plus this extra one for the villagers to use to make their own shows. The question was, with the world on their TV sets, what would the village choose to watch?
They have told us that they're much more interested in what happens in Waddington than in what happens in Romania.
95% of the village will even tune out the British soap operas to watch Waddington's own Ben Whitten practice for the choir boy contest.
Action!
It seems everyone in Waddington has had airtime, including a cast of dozens in the kids' Cops and Robbers show, shot on location. It looks like someone's home movie, but that is exactly why the village is watching.
There's a buzz about the village at the moment. Everyone at some stage will have been talking about it. It's drawn the community together.
The whole adventure was the focus of a documentary by the TV company that set it up. Shooting is almost finished, spelling the end of WVTV, which leaves the villagers wondering if they can ever again fill their evenings by simply watching television. John Donvan, ABC News, Waddington, England.
That's our report on World and Waddington News tonight. I'm Peter Jennings. We'll see you again tomorrow. Good night.
Wednesday.
A couple of black kids had a fight with 3 white kids. He took the bat and he hit me upside the head.
Racial violence tears the city apart.
Take a look at the headlines. The press is gunning for us.
He was black. Period. End of discussion. End of life.
Wheel of Fortune, tonight at 6:30.
This is Eyewitness News with Floyd Kelber, Steve Dessler with weather, Jim Rose for Tim Weigel with sports, and the Eyewitness News team.
Good evening, Chicago. Mayor Richard Daley appears to be about to lose the first round in his battle for a new airport for Chicago. Sam Skinner, the United States Secretary of Transportation, said today he will probably deny Chicago's request for money for an airport study. Paul Meinke, this is somewhat of a surprise.
Although not terribly unexpected at City Hall. They were bracing for this. They had a hint of it early on. The mayor wants Sam Skinner to approve a $5 million federal study of the city's controversial Lake Calumet Airport proposal. That has left the Bi-State Planning Group, which is studying 4 possible sites for a 3rd major airport, all of them outside of Chicago, screaming bloody murder. While his formal decision won't come for a few days, Skinner this afternoon made it The bad news, you have 10 seconds to try to stop. Now talk it out. You never know. It's a thing. Good luck.
Pine Park.
No chance. If you'd called an O for your vowel, you might have had a chance. That was really about the only. Yeah. It's easier when you turn all the letters, isn't it?
Yeah.
Boy, you did very well, though. You have nothing to be ashamed of here. $13,750. You are, in fact, coming back tomorrow. For the record, we have to check this. You don't have to look. That's not in the rules. Let's just see what this was. It happened to be the sports boat, as it turned out. So we'll put that back, and all 5 prizes will be available tomorrow. You may be in this very same spot. You never know. We'll be right back after this.
I'm not asking for much. Just a good small car at a good small price. Of course, it's got to have air conditioning and automatic. And AM/FM cassette, power steering, rear defroster.
Breakthrough, a loaded Ford Escort with 2.9 financing or $1,000 cash back for total savings of over $2,200 at your local Ford dealer now. Quality people, quality products.
Well, there you go. It never hurts to ask.
A better value on photo processing than Dominick's, because at Dominick's you always get a second set of prints absolutely free with every original roll of C41 film developed.
No one looks like
And for 1 week only, with every 3-inch regular size C41 color print order, you'll receive a coupon to have your next roll developed absolutely free. That's right, free prints and free photo processing.
Great Scott. Holmes, what do you make of this mystery radio station?
Easy, my dear Watson. Observe.
Well, that's WXEZ, FM 100 and AM 820.
The same, and yet not the same. The keen listener will note that WXEZ is better than before, with more vocals, easy hits from Phil Collins, Miami's Sound Machine, Al Jarreau.
Well, Holmes, one thing I don't understand. With the new sound of WXEZ, who would listen to anything else?
That, Watson, is a mystery to me.
When my boyfriend invited me for pasta, he served Chianti. I said, grazie. He served fettuccine. I said, grazie. He served grated topping. I said, hold your horses, bucko. See, some grated toppings are only 2/3 cheese and 1/3 fats and fillers. But Kraft is 100% grated Parmesan cheese. So you see, there's grazie and there's not so grazie.
Kraft 100% grated Parmesan for 100% great Parmesan taste.
Do you ever wonder?
Tonight at 10, Frank Matthey ponders the perplexing particulars you may have wondered about. Do you ever wonder? Tonight at 10 on Eyewitness News.
Transportation assistance for Wheel of Fortune provided by Delta Airlines with over 250 cities on the Delta route system. In flight, experience Delta's award-winning service and friendly hospitality from Delta Airlines. Once again, Pat and Vanna.
Thanks, Charlie. We are plumb out of time.
Yes, we are.
We'll try again in bonus land tomorrow. Hope we do a little better. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Some contestants will receive from the Gitano family of products P.S. Gitano jeans, proportionately sized to fit the short, regular, and long-waisted woman. Gitano, the spirit of family. And Beautiful Perms, fabulous hair color and matrix essentials for healthy hair and skin, only in fine salons. The trend is matrix. And the Presto Salad Shooter Slicer Shredder, point and shoot wherever you want it. To clean, just rinse and wipe. Store anywhere, the Presto Salad Shooter. And shout now, wash later with Power Stick Shout. Want tough stains out? Power Stick Shout. It's the pick of the sticks. And RIT for the latest looks in color. RIT dyes and fabric treatments are easy and fun to use. Like your home and your clothes stylish, go for RIT. And why wait weeks for eyeglasses? Lens Crafters in-store labs custom craft your top quality glasses in about an hour. Lens Crafters.
Is your husband sick of you sharing everything that happens at home with your friends or family? The minute you get in a fight, are you on the phone to your mother, your sister, or best friend? If so, the Oprah Winfrey Show is looking for wives whose husbands are tired of them telling all their personal business. If your husband is sick of your blabbing, or if telling your business has gotten you into big trouble with him, call us now at 591-9111. Husbands who say, our business is our business. 591-9111.
Wheel of Fortune is produced by Merv Griffin Enterprises, distributed by King World.
Talk to me, CJ. What are you really feeling?
It's very sweet.
This is what sets every Mazda apart. It's called Conseil Engineering. Engineering based on human feelings.
Keep an eye on his pulse, please.
With it, Mazda can actually learn how to create cars that feel just right. Because to us, feeling right is what driving is really all about. Mazda.
It just feels right.
We got home late and the phone was ringing. It was the police. Our daughter at school had been in a car accident. I needed more credit on my Citibank Visa to fly to Seattle.
He called for an emergency credit increase and told me why. I gave him the increase over the phone.
The accident was pretty bad. But our daughter was all right. Thanks to Citibank, we could be with her when she needed us.
Not just Visa, Citibank Visa.
This summer at the Magic Kingdom, Mickey's Starland. At Epcot Center, it's Captain EO in 3D. The exciting Body Wars ride. The Fury of the Maelstrom.